After a brutal battle against giants, Ronan stands alone as the last survivor of the Imperial army. But victory comes at a steep price. As a new wave of giants threatens the world, his dying commander, Grand Marshal Adeshan, uses her last time slip to send him back to the past. Now a young man again, Ronan must change his fate. He needs to reunite with his friends and forms a powerful trio, all while preparing for his future at Filion Academy. Will he become the strongest swordsman the Empire has ever seen? The world's savior?
But before we dive into the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep bringing you more content like this. Already subscribed? Alright, let's get into the video!
The tale begins amidst a battlefield drenched in blood. Countless warriors have perished, and only one remains standing, our protagonist. His comrades, his friends, all fallen in this brutal fight. As he surveys the desolate scene once more, the realization hits him. This place will be their vast graveyard. Struggling just to catch his breath, he hears a voice. It soon becomes clear to him that this voice belongs to their greatest enemy, one he hadn't expected to still be alive. This being, brimming with wings, is called a Hyatt, one of the titans responsible for the destruction ravaging this land. These titans had only appeared in the world 20 days prior, yet in that brief span, they'd unleashed chaos without any apparent purpose. Humanity, unable to fathom their motives, had nonetheless fought valiantly to stop them. The protagonist, seething with anger, blames a Hyatt for the downfall of the Empire. In response, a Hyatt tells him that his own time is nearly up and that he will soon return to someone's side. Feigning confidence, our protagonist informs a Hyatt that the other two titans had also been slain. The second had been incinerated by a fiery-tempered red dragon, reduced to ash by its scorching breath. The last titan had been sealed away for eternity by a wise old man named Loren. He hoped his words might strike fear into a Hyatt, making the titans reconsider facing humanity. But his bluff failed. A Hyatt reveals that the titans share their senses, and it was no one-sided battle. The warriors who fought the other titans perished alongside them, meaning the last defenders of the world were gone. The protagonist rejects this notion, insisting that he still lives and can fight. But a Hyatt is aware of the extent of his injuries. It knows that he too is nearing his end. The giant remarks that, had the protagonist realized his true potential earlier and honed it, he would have posed a far greater threat to their plans. But these regrets come too late. The protagonist already knows he's led a life full of mistakes, and he no longer wants to hear the Titan's words. Despite this, a Hyatt commends him for his accomplishments, saying he should feel proud, even if it's all in vain. This world is doomed to be swallowed by starlight. Before a Hyatt can finish, the protagonist cuts its speech short, quite literally, by severing the Titan's head with a powerful strike. The blow is strong enough to decapitate the enormous creature. Yet, even as he stands over his fallen foe, his gaze remains cold. He knows that what's done is done. With his adrenaline fading, he finally feels the full extent of his injuries. He could hardly catch his breath. Memories of the first time he met his comrades flooded his mind. The first to approach him was a man with a scar over his eye. Soon, the others followed, welcoming him into their ranks. They had fought countless battles together, but now, they were all gone. The protagonist wondered why they chose to come to this perilous place, even though they knew the risks were too great. His anger simmered as he realized their actions were driven by pride, a reckless decision that had cost them everything. But it was too late for regrets. One question gnawed at him. Why was he the only one capable of hurting these monstrous beings? These titans could deflect even the Empire's most powerful sword techniques, yet his blade alone could penetrate their defenses. The regret weighed heavily on him. If only he had known earlier, maybe more lives could have been spared. He lowered his head in despair, feeling utterly defeated. Just then, a faint voice reached his ears. Startled, he moved quickly, recognizing the familiar sound. To his astonishment, someone had survived the massacre. Leaning against a massive boulder, he saw a woman, though she was in bad shape herself. Relief washed over him as he realized it was the Grand Commander, Adeshan, the leader of this doomed mission to destroy the Titan. Ronan, the protagonist, couldn't help but tease her about her condition, to which she retorted, pointing out that he didn't look much better. It was here that the story revealed our protagonist's name, Ronan. Adeshan, trying to gauge the situation, asked if a Hyatt had been defeated. Ronan confirmed, saying he had slain the giant. Tears welled in her eyes as she thanked him for his efforts. Ronan was taken aback to see his commander in such a vulnerable state. Trying to lighten the mood, he made a request. He asked Adeshan to ensure that all the fallen on the battlefield received proper burials. Typically, in wars like this, the dead were either abandoned or burned, but Ronan didn't want that fate for his comrades. However, Adeshan confessed that she wasn't sure she could fulfill his wish. She was too weak to handle such a task. She even suggested that Ronan might be better suited for it, but that idea was quickly dismissed when Ronan erupted into a fit of coughing. He admitted that he too was on the brink of death and had been putting on a brave face, knowing full well there was little he could do now. Adeshan then asked what Ronan would do if, by some miracle, he survived this day. Ronan thought for a moment, but only one answer came to mind. He shared that he wanted to attend the academy. The reason for this desire came from something Ahayat had said, about him never having fully developed his abilities. But the real reason was deeper. This had been his late sister's wish. She had always wanted him to pursue studies at the academy. Yet, Ronan now felt it was irrelevant, believing he would soon be reunited with his sister in the afterlife. Adeshan tried to reassure him, confident that a rescue party must be on its way, but Ronan dismissed her hope, calling it futile. As they awaited their impending deaths, a brilliant light suddenly blazed from above, startling them both. They wondered why the storm had abruptly ceased, but the calm was soon replaced by an overwhelming pressure that filled the air. Ronan struggled to grasp what was happening until he glanced up at the sky and saw it, a massive giant with 8 wings. But it wasn't alone. A host of other titans accompanied it, similar to the ones that had nearly exterminated humanity. Ahayat had been one of them, and now they had returned, this time in full force. Ronan stood, bewildered, questioning where these creatures had come from. Adeshan's last shred of hope crumbled. She had believed the defeat of the first 3 giants was the end, but she now realized that wasn't true. Despite having tried to save the world 3 times, she was out of options. Confusion and despair overtook her, leaving her paralyzed. But Ronan's voice broke through her despair. He urged her to use her telekinesis to help his sword reach the giants, as it couldn't reach them on its own. Adeshan was stunned by Ronan's resolve. She couldn't fathom how he still planned to fight, even against such overwhelming odds. Yet, Ronan unsheathed his sword and vowed to do everything in his power to repel the titans. His unwavering determination stirred a flicker of hope within her. She began to believe that Ronan might be the key to defeating them after all. She called out to him, and as he turned to face her, she told him to stop talking, then did something completely unexpected. Adeshan produced a glowing blue orb from her mouth and transferred it into Ronan. He was bewildered and had no idea what this was for. As Adeshan leaned closer, she whispered something into his ear. Ronan, confused, tried to ask more questions, but she continued whispering. When she finished, Ronan exclaimed in shock, demanding to know what she had just done. But his expression changed when he heard her final request. She asked Ronan that if they ever met again, he should remind her not to do anything foolish and instead to remain a simple tailor. Her last words froze Ronan in place. But before he could react, the giants behind them began casting a spell. For the first time, he saw a gentle smile on Adeshan's face. A brilliant, blinding light surged toward them, and the spell struck with full force. In the aftermath, the only thing left was the blue orb Adeshan had passed to Ronan. When Ronan opened his eyes again, everything had changed. The sky was clear and blue, and he was no longer surrounded by the corpses of the fallen. His surroundings had transformed into peaceful fields. Nearby, children played along a riverbank. Ronan quickly realized what had happened. He was back in Nabuden, his hometown. This marked the beginning of his return to the past, the first day of his regression. His head throbbed with the weight of all that had transpired. Adeshan's parting words echoed in his mind. Before the giant's attack, she had done something extraordinary. She had given him the blue orb, a powerful artifact capable of turning back time. She had also told him about her previous life, when she had been nothing more than an ordinary tailor. The orb had allowed her to regress, giving her the chance to change the course of history, and it was through this power that she had risen to become the Grand Commander of the Empire. But the orb only allowed 4 regressions, and Adeshan had already used 3. The final chance now belonged to Ronan. She believed that the power to defeat the giants rested in Ronan's hands. He was the key to preventing the world's collapse. Adeshan also whispered to him that this opportunity would give him the time he needed to hone his skills and achieve his dream of attending the academy. She mentioned the best place for him to train, Philin Academy, a renowned institution filled with people who could help him grow stronger. As a parting request, she asked Ronan to remind her, if they ever met again, to follow her dream of becoming a tailor. In the present, Ronan was still grappling with disbelief. He thought it might all be a dream and tried to wake himself, unsure of what to do if this was reality. But as he processed everything, a crucial thought crossed his mind. Grabbing a stick nearby, Ronan sprinted home. This was the time when his sister was still alive. He hurried through the crowd, excitement filling him as he anticipated seeing her again. A smile spread across his face, but as he ran, something caught his attention, forcing him to stop. A group of young boys was tormenting another child, who was hanging upside down. Ronan sighed in frustration, recognizing these bullies. They hadn't changed even in the past. He considered continuing on his way, but something unusual drew his eye. The boy wasn't suspended by a rope, it was magic. Ronan scanned the area, searching for the magic user, knowing that this kind of ability was rare and highly valuable in battle. Then he spotted a red-haired boy controlling the spell. The red-haired child looked weary, unsure of how long he could maintain the magic. Ronan realized that if this went on, the hanging boy could be seriously hurt. The victim begged the bullies to let him go, explaining that he didn't have any money and that his mother's medicine for the month had been too expensive. The leader of the group, a golden-haired boy, sneered and struck the child, telling him that if he wanted to be a good son, he should have earned more money. The other boys laughed and watched as the cruelty unfolded. The leader then ordered the red-haired boy to lift the victim higher into the tree. The magic user hesitated, trying to protest, but the golden-haired bully wouldn't hear it. Intimidated, the red-haired boy obeyed out of fear that he, too, would become a target. This boy's name was Assel, and as he complied, he reflected on how he ended up in this mess. It had all started with his desire to prove to everyone that he was skilled at magic. Assel's hands trembled. He wanted to refuse the bully's order, to stand up to him, but his fear paralyzed him. Just as Assel was about to speak up, a sudden blow interrupted the situation. Ronan had struck him with a stick, telling him to stop using his magic. Assel lost concentration, and the suspended boy fell to the ground. Enraged, the bully turned on Assel, but before he could act, Ronan stepped in. He told Assel to ignore the bully and focus on talking to him instead. Ronan asked Assel where he had learned to use telekinesis magic, curious despite the unfolding tension. Assel sheepishly explained that he had bought a cheap grimoire from a traveling merchant. Ronan was impressed, such a rare ability from something inexpensive. He realized that magic like this could be essential in his fight against the giants. However, before he could dwell further on the idea, a familiar sound interrupted his thoughts. The golden-haired bully had drawn his sword, and the situation was about to escalate. The bully was livid, feeling humiliated as Ronan kept ignoring him. In a fit of rage, he charged at Ronan with his sword, but Ronan remained unfazed. He didn't feel threatened by a young boy wielding a weapon, and even wondered how the boy had come into possession of a longsword. Ronan quickly noticed the bully's poor stance and weak technique. The attack was clumsy, and Ronan easily dodged it, much to the bully's shock. Despite being back in his younger body, Ronan's battle instincts from his previous life remained sharp. The golden-haired bully, embarrassed by his failure, tried to save face. He claimed that Ronan had been lucky and offered to spare his life if he showed some respect. His words were nothing more than empty threats, but when the bully insulted Ronan's sister, suggesting he'd take care of her if Ronan died, it was the final straw. Without hesitation, Ronan swung the wooden stick he held, landing with a precise blow. Blood flowed as the bully's ear was struck, leaving him in a state of shock. It took a few moments for him to realize what had happened before he dropped his sword and began to scream in pain. The other boys, terrified by what they had just witnessed, froze. Ronan approached the bully with a cold, serious expression, making it clear who had won. The bully knew he had made a grave mistake, and though his companions wanted to help him, they were too afraid to approach Ronan, who had just disarmed their leader using nothing but a wooden stick. Ronan then turned to the remaining boys, warning them to flee if they didn't want to suffer the same fate. Before they could escape, he demanded they return all the money they had stolen. Realizing they had no chance against him, the bullies quickly complied. Within moments, the bullied boy had his money back. The boy was astonished, noticing that the amount returned was far more than what had been stolen. Ronan told him to keep it all, as he didn't need the extra money. Grateful, the boy thanked Ronan sincerely. As they spoke, Assel, the red-haired magic user, stood by, looking remorseful. He apologized to the boy, explaining that he had been too scared to disobey the bully's orders. Assel kept apologizing, making the boy feel awkward, but the boy smiled and reassured him. He revealed that he had understood Assel's situation all along and didn't hold him responsible. Assel's apologies were deeply appreciated, and after a brief farewell, the boy left, leaving Ronan and Assel alone. Ronan studied Assel for a moment, realizing that this person didn't seem like a typical boy. In fact, Ronan addressed Assel as a girl. Moving on to business, Ronan told Assel they should meet at the same spot again in 4 days. Assel tried to ask more questions, but Ronan offered no answers. Just before leaving, Ronan gave a final reminder. If Assel didn't show up, there would be consequences. He was now left alone, reflecting on everything that had just happened. For the moment, we'll refer to Assel as a boy, though Ronan still suspected otherwise. After a short walk, Ronan finally arrived at his home, carrying flowers for his sister. He recalled that she loved these particular blooms, but feeling a bit embarrassed, he almost tossed them aside. Just as he was about to, his sister spotted him and opened the door. Her voice stopped him in his tracks, leaving Ronan momentarily frozen, unsure of how to react. In his past life, after his sister's death, Ronan had often wondered what he would do if he ever had the chance to see her again. That regret had haunted him, but now, with this second chance, things were different. Here she was, standing before him, alive and smiling, her usual bright and gentle self. She was even pleased to see that he had returned home earlier than usual. All Ronan could manage to say was, "I'm back." Those were the only words that came to mind. Without missing a beat, his sister, Errol, began preparing food for him. She teased him playfully, saying she never expected to receive flowers from her brother. Ronan felt a pang of warmth as he watched her happiness over such a simple gift. He then asked her how old she was this year, trying to get a sense of the current timeline. Errol revealed she was 22 years old, and with that, Ronan realized he had about 10 years left before the giants would invade the world. Errol, noticing something off in his behavior, approached and checked his temperature, concerned by how strangely he was acting. But to Ronan, she was exactly as he remembered, bright, kind, and full of warmth. He silently wished that this peaceful moment could last forever. However, that thought reminded him of something important he needed to do. Summoning his resolve, Ronan told his sister that he had something serious to discuss. His sudden change in demeanor caught her by surprise. He then revealed that he planned to enroll in the academy. At first, Errol struggled to process the news, but once it sank in, her face lit up with joy. She was thrilled to hear this from her brother. Excitedly, she rushed off into another room, rummaging through their belongings until she found what she had been preparing for this very moment. Errol emerged holding a large pot. Curious, Ronan peeked inside, and to his astonishment, the pot was filled with coins. It was more than enough to cover the cost of his education at the academy. She had secretly been saving up to surprise him with this gift. Ronan hadn't anticipated such a gesture from his sister, and he was deeply moved by her thoughtfulness. He expressed his gratitude for her kindness, but gently informed her that the money she had saved still wouldn't be enough. Ronan then mentioned the name of the academy he wanted to attend, the Imperial Institution, Philin Academy. Hearing this, Errol's face shifted from confusion to shock, and she let out a loud gasp as she realized what her brother was aiming for. Philin Academy was the Empire's most prestigious educational institution, renowned for its elite professors and massive imperial funding. It was also known as the Hero Factory. Many legendary figures had graduated from Philin Academy, including Grand Commander Adeshan herself, the famed Swordmaster Shalafan, and even the notorious criminal Winter Witch. Ronan knew that these individuals had all played key roles in humanity's struggle against the giants. The academy had even been personally recommended by Adeshan. However, Philin Academy was infamous for its extremely high entrance requirements and exorbitant tuition fees. Despite these challenges, Ronan was determined to give it his best shot, especially with Errol cheering him on so enthusiastically. Her support fueled his determination to pass the entrance exam and prove that he could make it. As Ronan was heading out, he encountered someone unexpected, Assel. Ronan, in a moment of light teasing, mistakenly called him Missile, which Assel quickly corrected. The red-haired boy had come because of Ronan's rather intimidating threat, though Ronan hadn't intended to scare him. Since Assel had shown up, Ronan told him they would be busy that evening for a test, something that took Assel by surprise, as he hadn't expected anything like this. Ronan explained that he wanted Assel to use his telekinesis on him, asking Assel to lift him as high as possible. Assel, concerned about the danger, hesitated, warning Ronan that it could be risky. However, Ronan was confident that he would be fine if Assel followed his instructions. Reluctantly, Assel cast the spell. Using a technique called the Invisible Hand, he directed his magic toward Ronan. To Ronan's amazement, he could actually feel the magic's grip on his body. His feet slowly lifted off the ground, and within seconds, Ronan was soaring higher. The sensation was thrilling. It reminded Ronan of the feeling he had experienced when battling giants, though the height and stability of the spell were not quite the same. Nevertheless, telekinesis was a crucial ability that could give him the edge he needed in combat against the towering foes. With his own abilities and Assel's telekinesis, Ronan realized he was closer to being ready for the battles ahead. Assel, now straining to maintain the spell, was clearly reaching his limit. Despite this, Ronan urged him to hold on just a bit longer as he wanted to test one last thing. The protagonist drew his weapon and, without warning, slashed through the air. Assel stood in awe, realizing that Ronan had just cut through his mana, disrupting the telekinesis spell. As soon as Ronan landed, Assel couldn't help but ask how he had performed such an incredible feat. This was the first time he had witnessed someone sever mana with a blade. However, Ronan had no clear answers. He, too, was unsure why or how this phenomenon occurred. He suspected that his mysterious ability was something he needed to explore further, though it wasn't a priority at the moment. His current theory was that his sword, Sworder, had the capability to cut through mana, but unraveling the truth behind it would have to wait. After this brief test, Ronan declared that Assel had passed. He handed Assel a spare bag and informed him that they had a critical task to complete before the moon vanished. This mission, Ronan explained, was of such importance that it could be considered the first chapter in his life story. With that, the two of them set off on their journey. During their conversation, Ronan shared his plans about enrolling in Philin Academy. Assel, still taken aback, tried to clarify what he had heard, as Philin Academy only admitted the Empire's top-tier individuals. Ronan grew irritated with Assel's repeated questions, but he confirmed that his plan was real. He then asked if Assel had any intention of joining the Academy as well. Assel confessed that he did want to enroll, but he lacked confidence in his abilities. He saw himself as talentless, timid, and overly fearful. Ronan, however, had little patience for this self-pity. He bluntly asked Assel if he really wanted to continue living this way. This question struck a chord in Assel, making him realize that he was indeed wasting his potential. Ronan didn't sugarcoat things. He acknowledged that Assel had a tendency to be fearful and emotional, but none of that mattered. What mattered, Ronan explained, was that Assel still had the chance to change. Ronan reminded him that time was the most valuable resource anyone had. Every moment that passed was something they could never get back, and if Assel didn't start making changes now, he would one day regret everything. Ronan's words were deeply personal, coming from his own experiences and regrets in his previous life. He had lived a life full of missed opportunities, and now, with a second chance, he understood the cost of inaction. He then asked Assel if he was ready to make those changes. Assel, surprised by the depth of Ronan's concern for him, remained silent for a moment, processing everything. But just as Ronan began to walk away, Assel finally responded, saying what Ronan had been waiting to hear. Assel, determined to change, declared that he would accompany Ronan to Philin Academy. Ronan turned back to him with a grin, remarking that this was the first time Assel had shown real courage. But in truth, everything was going according to Ronan's plan. It was written all over his face. That night, their first mission began. After a quick briefing from Ronan, Assel found himself ready, though anxious. The two were quietly observing their target. This was the first challenge Assel had to face in order to improve his abilities. Ronan had chosen a suitable adversary, the lunar goblins. These creatures, easily distinguished from regular goblins by their yellow skin, were notorious for their obsession with gold and treasure. They often ambushed traders to steal goods and held elaborate celebrations when they hoarded enough treasure, especially under the full moon. And tonight was a full moon, the perfect opportunity for Ronan's plan. With a determined look, Ronan announced that they would be stealing the goblins' treasure. Assel, trembling slightly, was confused and terrified by the task. He'd never heard of the lunar goblins' festivals before, and he asked Ronan how he knew about this. Ronan couldn't explain. His knowledge came from his past life. But he reassured Assel, wrapping an arm around him and explaining that all they needed was for Assel to use his telekinesis to quietly move the treasure into their bags. Assel, however, wasn't so confident. He worried that any mistake could wake the goblins, which would put them in a dire situation. He even asked Ronan to reconsider, but Ronan dismissed his fears, calling him scared. Then he laid out the importance of the mission. They needed two things to get into Philin Academy: money and battle experience. The aristocrats who attended the academy had been trained since birth, so if they wanted to compete, they needed to take risks and face real danger. Fighting the lunar goblins would not only give them the funds they needed, but it would also provide valuable experience, a perfect opportunity. With no other options, Assel reluctantly agreed, though he couldn't help but cry under the pressure. Ronan's logic was sound, and Assel knew deep down that there was no turning back. As instructed, he began casting his telekinesis. The night remained still and silent as, one by one, the goblins' treasures floated into their bags. Assel concentrated hard, desperate not to make a mistake, while Ronan watched with a satisfied smile. The treasure chest was almost empty, and their bags were now full and even glowing from the sheer amount of riches inside. When the final piece was secured, Ronan praised Assel for his remarkable effort, though in truth, he had always believed Assel was capable of pulling it off. As they finished packing, Ronan couldn't help but slip up again, referring to Assel as her, once more, thinking to himself that this girl was more impressive than he had expected. His expression shifted, his eyes and grin turning slightly sinister, as he considered what a valuable ally, or minion, he had gained. With their mission complete, Ronan gathered their loot, and they prepared to head out, their first test a resounding success. Ronan turned to Assel and said they should head back quickly before anything went wrong. However, it seemed Ronan had jinxed it, as something began to stir in the forest. Two men sprinted through the woods, chasing after a bird. Their loud voices immediately caught the attention of Ronan and Assel, who wondered who these strangers were and why they were causing such a commotion. Unfortunately, the ruckus woke up the goblins. Their leader quickly checked the treasure, and upon realizing it was gone, sounded the alarm. Within seconds, the entire group of goblins gathered, trying to figure out what had happened to their stash. They soon spotted two humans attempting to flee, Ronan and Assel. Realizing they had been spotted, Assel began to panic, collapsing to his knees in fear. Ronan, however, remained composed, refusing to abandon their bags of treasure. They needed the money for tuition, and running wasn't an option. As the goblins closed in, Ronan inspected his weapon, a longsword made of cheap steel, but sturdy enough to last through 15 strikes. Unfortunately, there were 30 goblins charging at them. Assel, frozen in terror, could only watch as the goblins prepared to attack. He called out to Ronan to be careful, but Ronan, undeterred, made a powerful wide slash, taking down 3 goblins in a single stroke, their heads separated from their bodies. Assel was in shock at the sight. Ronan, calm as ever, noted that he still had 14 attacks left. The crows in the forest cawed as they witnessed the massacre. One by one, the lunar goblins fell to Ronan's swordsmanship, their limbs severed. It was a display of sheer skill, leaving the goblins no chance of survival. Assel could hardly believe what he had seen. Ronan had taken down all 30 goblins by himself. The initial strike that felled 3 goblins had been just the beginning. As for the rest, Ronan had moved so swiftly that it seemed he vanished before swiftly dispatching each goblin. Assel marveled at his companion's genius in combat. When the battle was over, Ronan snapped Assel back to reality, reminding him not to zone out. With a smile, Ronan told him it was time to head home. The night was still young as they began their journey back, but the weight of the treasure-filled bags soon took its toll on their bodies. Ronan complained about his muscles aching after the brief fight and decided he would need to do some intense training the next day to strengthen himself. Curious about the earlier noise, Assel asked Ronan about it, but Ronan had no clear answer either. He was still irritated that the noise had disrupted their flawless plan. He mused that whoever had made the noise must have been crazy to shout so loudly in the middle of the night. As they continued walking, an arrow suddenly flew toward them, aimed at Assel. Though Assel noticed it, it was already too close for him to dodge. Fortunately, Ronan caught the arrow just in time, saving Assel from harm. Assel was shaken, realizing how close he had come to being hit. Ronan quickly scanned the area and spotted 2 figures, one of them holding a bow. Furious at being called kids by the strangers, Ronan watched as the 2 men approached. One of them apologized for firing the arrow, claiming they thought there were monsters nearby. His excuse sounded weak, and it became clear as he eyed the treasure in Ronan's bag that these 2 had ulterior motives. The 2 men exchanged a knowing glance, hinting at their intentions. The 2 men seemed to exchange a silent communication. Ronan wasn't fooled by their apologies. He recognized their deceit. With a serious expression, he confronted them, demanding to know who they were. The man with the bow was taken aback by the intensity of Ronan's response. He stepped closer, attempting to make small talk while subtly reaching for a concealed weapon. Moments later, he revealed their true intentions by swinging his weapon at Ronan. Ronan was familiar with the name Caliboro and reacted swiftly, seizing the man's wrist to thwart the attack. In one fluid motion, he countered with a punch that knocked the attacker out cold. Seeing his companion incapacitated, the second man charged at Ronan. Assel, noticing the incoming threat, used his telekinesis to grab Ronan's attention and at the last moment, cast a spell on the assailant. The man froze in place, bewildered by his sudden inability to move. Ronan couldn't help but smile at Assel's quick thinking. Seizing the opportunity, he disarmed the frozen attacker, snatching the dagger that clattered to the ground. The bewildered man didn't comprehend what had just transpired before Ronan dispatched him. A piercing scream echoed through the forest. Assel hesitantly asked if the attacker was dead, and Ronan confirmed that he had no intention of sparing someone who tried to kill them. He explained that the men were part of the notorious Caliboro group, known for their extensive history of crimes, including being the most ruthless poaching gang in the Empire. Ronan emphasized that they had to act decisively. If they didn't, it would be their organs being harvested instead. Allowing these criminals to leave, especially after uncovering their identities, would be a crime in itself. As they prepared to leave, Ronan sensed something unusual. The 2 noticed a bag moving erratically on the ground. Intrigued, they approached it, suspecting it might contain a poached animal. When Ronan unzipped the bag, a pair of glowing eyes met his gaze. Moments later, a blue creature burst out, soaring above them in the air. Ronan was baffled by the strange blue creature before him. Both he and Assel couldn't believe their eyes, initially thinking it was just an odd blue chicken. However, it turned out to be a charming bluebird. Assel was amazed, having never seen anything like it before. Ronan admitted he felt the same. As the bird fluttered around them, Ronan noticed a shackle on its leg. He recognized it as a Caliboro poaching device designed to disrupt the creature's mana and limit its movement. Ronan recalled that such shackles were typically employed on rare occasions, particularly when capturing mythical beasts. This realization made him think further. Suddenly, a mysterious voice emanated from the bird, accompanied by a glowing magic circle above its head. After a moment, the voice became clearer, claiming that a connection had finally been established. Both boys took a step back, startled. Assel was frightened, thinking the bird was speaking, but Ronan reassured him that it was merely a form of communication magic. Ronan then examined the bag the creature had come from, concluding that it might possess the ability to block mana. A figure then appeared, revealing itself as Varen, who was studying fantastical creatures at the institution. He introduced the bird as Marpus and mentioned that it had taken him quite some time to connect with it. Varen asked for their names, and Ronan replied they were merely passing through. He also recounted their encounter with the poachers who had kidnapped Marpus. He hesitated before detailing how they rescued the bird, deciding it was best to keep some things to himself. Varen was surprised that poachers had targeted his bird and expressed his gratitude to Ronan, though he wasn't sure how to repay him. Ronan insisted there was no need for that. They were just focused on returning Marpus. The blue bird looked exhausted, prompting Ronan to ask if it could fly once the shackle was removed. Varen confirmed this, stating Marpus had great instincts and would find its way back without issue. With a quick motion, Ronan drew his sword and severed the shackle binding Marpus. He called to the bird, urging it to return to its owner, who was undoubtedly worried about it. The bird's eyes sparkled with gratitude, but before it could fly away, Ronan noticed something unusual. Marpus nudged toward him, which annoyed Ronan, leaving him puzzled about its intentions. Varen clarified that Marpus wanted him to pluck one of its feathers as a token, symbolizing its desire to meet its savior again. The feather would serve as a compass for the bird. After that, Marpus spread its wings and took off into the sky, leaving Varen to express his thanks and hopes that Ronan and Assel would visit again soon. The bird soared away with incredible speed, a delightful smile on its face as it returned to Varen. Ronan was astonished at how fast it was. Assel then pointed out that something was on Ronan's hand. Ronan shifted his focus to Assel's comment, and both were puzzled by what was on Ronan's hand. A few days later, they arrived at a bustling caravan where merchants were busy loading and unloading goods for trade. Among them was an elderly man examining a jewel. This man, Duan Carbel, owner of Carbel Merchantry, offered 20 gold pieces for the jewel due to its quality and craftsmanship. He mentioned it must be his lucky day, speaking to Ronan and Assel, who were selling the loot they had obtained from the goblins. Ronan was pleased to find someone appraising treasures fairly, unlike other merchants who tried to lowball him. As their negotiation concluded, Ronan reached into his pocket, wanting to see if Duan could appraise something else. He pulled out a mysterious egg with a shell resembling a galaxy. Mr. Duan began examining the egg, which turned out to be left behind by Marpus. This peculiar egg radiated a strange and powerful aura, and Ronan was uncertain of its significance. Initially, they both thought the blue bird had humorously left a gift, which annoyed Ronan, prompting him to throw the egg against a large rock. The impact was so forceful it shattered the rock without leaving a mark on the egg, leaving both Ronan and Assel in disbelief. Returning to the present, Duan was still inspecting the egg while Ronan waited patiently, sensing it might be valuable. The old man concentrated, trying to deduce its nature, and Ronan's excitement grew as he anticipated discovering what the egg was. However, his hopes were dashed when Mr. Duan concluded it was merely horse manure. Ronan refuted this, but the old man insisted he didn't recognize it and recommended having it appraised at a specialized facility. This only piqued Ronan's curiosity further, leading him to decide against selling it. Meanwhile, Assel continued to wonder if it truly was just a lump of waste. Ronan then inquired if the old man sold books about Filian Academy, sharing that they were preparing for the entrance exam and needed more information. Mr. Duan expressed delight, saying his daughter was also about to take the exam and could assist them. Moments later, a young woman appeared, asking her father what was happening. Duan introduced Ronan and Assel as customers who had just completed a significant deal. The girl, Mara Carbel, the old man's only daughter, drew Ronan's attention immediately. He was captivated by her striking appearance, green eyes, and a sharp profile. Duan introduced them, but then scolded Mara for her brusque manner. He apologized for her behavior, explaining that she had grown up in commerce and often spoke bluntly. Assel assured the old man it was all fine, but Ronan stepped forward, questioning Mara's identity. He asked if she was indeed Mara, to which she affirmed. Even revealing her middle name was Senator Mara was curious how Ronan knew this. Lost in thought, Ronan recalled someone from his past who bore a resemblance to her, but was built quite differently. He decided to ask Mara a more personal question and leaned closer, whispering to her about a specific detail. Ronan directly asked Mara if she had a deek, catching her off guard. She thought it was a ridiculous question, but Ronan's serious expression indicated he wasn't joking. After a moment of surprise, Mara processed the question, leaving her momentarily speechless. Ronan then remarked that, from what he could see, it seemed she didn't have one, which only irritated her further. As he contemplated other possibilities that might prove him wrong, a blurry shape approached. It was Mara's hand. She swatted him and told him to be quiet. Ronan didn't have time to dodge, and the slap brought back a familiar pain. Looking at her again, he noticed she bore a striking resemblance to someone from his past. Count Mara Senator Ronan had met Mara's son when he was a disciplinary soldier in a Marlin, where she managed supplies. They had a good rapport, thanks to her easygoing nature, but she became uncharacteristically angry whenever the soldiers talked about deeks. Ronan recalled that she had a habit of swatting at people when annoyed, which piqued his curiosity back then, but he never got the chance to ask her about it. She had died in the war long before he did, fighting against the angels. In the present, Ronan smiled, realizing he had the answer about Mara. Her behavior stemmed from being mistaken for a boy. The soldiers all assumed she was one of them. Mara noticed Ronan's smile, and it only frustrated her more. She approached him to teach him a lesson, but he playfully swatted her head, causing her to halt in her tracks. He told her to quit acting up since she had already hit him once, but this warning didn't deter her. She retaliated with a strong headbutt, reigniting their playful fight. They resembled two kids squabbling over a piece of candy, leaving Assel and Mr. Duan in disbelief as they watched. Eventually, the two calmed down and gathered inside a tent. Assel wore a perplexed expression, wondering how they were now acting like old friends after their earlier tussle. Ronan and Mara continued their conversation, this time discussing their weapons. Mara offered her insights on their effective use and asked Ronan why he was carrying 3 swords and a magic wand. Ronan explained that he relied heavily on his swords and needed backups in case one broke. Mara assessed the 3 swords and determined that the black iron sword was the best. She noted that black iron was known for its durability, and many knights sought such weapons. This was also the first time Ronan realized he owned a black iron sword, which had been his favorite. Mara continued, saying the wand had a magic stone embedded in it. Then she turned to Assel and asked if he was the rare mage Ronan had mentioned. Assel confirmed this, albeit nervously. Curious, Mara inquired about the type of magic he could perform. Assel replied that he specialized in telekinesis. This revelation shocked Mara, as she recognized how rare that ability was among mages. She suggested he could easily earn a scholarship with such talent. She then shifted the conversation back to Ronan, saying they were the only concern for the upcoming practical exam. She asked what he planned to demonstrate to impress the judges, particularly techniques that would capture their interest. Ronan realized he was unaware of this requirement. Mara explained that candidates needed to impress the professors and demonstrate their capabilities during the practical exam. She emphasized that even if someone didn't excel in the theory portion, they could still pass if they performed well in practice. She added that if applicants couldn't prove their worth, they should just forget about attending the academy. Ronan sighed, feeling this only complicated matters, believing that a swordsman simply needed to be skilled with a sword. The two then discussed the typical demonstrations in the practical exam, where applicants usually showcase their family's secret techniques. Mara noted that some even displayed their personal mana fighting styles. Ronan interrupted, questioning the concept of mana. This left Mara dumbfounded by his reaction. She explained that anyone hoping to enroll in Philin Academy should at least be able to use mana. As she spoke, Ronan's expression showed his lack of understanding about the basic requirements for the entrance exam. It dawned on Mara that he couldn't sense his own mana. Her body trembled in disbelief, and her theory was confirmed when Ronan confused mana with aura. She couldn't believe someone could be so clueless before attempting to enter Philin Academy, and she buried her face in frustration. Ronan questioned why she was making such a big deal about it, insisting he might know what she was referring to. Mara stood up and instructed Ronan to step outside, which left him confused. She grabbed the 2 short swords from the table, explaining that she had left her own weapon at the blacksmith. This made Ronan uneasy, as he worried she might damage his swords. However, she assured him that she'd finish whatever she was doing before that could happen, even promising to compensate him 3 times over if she broke them. With a resigned sigh, Ronan understood there was no stopping her. Mara urged Ronan to hurry outside as she planned to give him special training. In this world, mana is the essence of nature's power. It's present everywhere, but not everyone can harness it. To use mana, one must see and feel it, a process known as mana sense. Achieving this usually requires rigorous training and can take about a year. Those who master this early often apply to Philin Academy. Mara conveyed this basic information to Ronan, warning him that if he couldn't even differentiate between mana and aura, he should forget about entering Philin. Outside, they both readied their weapons. She continued, explaining that aura is a type of mana, yet the distinction is significant. The innate power gained through intense effort is called aura. She asked Ronan if he grasped any of this. Ronan recalled countless individuals in his past life who claimed to be aura users and wielded strange powers, finding them both irritating and impressive. However, those powers had never been enough to defeat him. His thoughts returned to the present as Mara declared it was time to begin their training, insisting he would learn quicker by using his body rather than overthinking. Initially dismissive, Ronan didn't think much of Mara because she seemed so young, but in a flash, she closed the gap between them, showcasing extraordinary speed. Caught off guard, Ronan's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. He managed to defend against her attack, but he was clearly at a disadvantage. Locking eyes with Mara, he recognized the fierce expression that reminded him of a past encounter. They began exchanging blows, displaying impressive swordsmanship that put them almost on equal footing. Ronan was taken aback by Mara's power at such a young age, especially since she wielded 2 swords. He wondered if she was indeed using mana as she had claimed. The trouble was, he couldn't tell because he lacked the ability to see or sense mana. Meanwhile, Mara was in shock. Her original plan was to end the fight quickly, but it had dragged on much longer than expected. Even though she was using mana, Ronan was holding his ground against all her attacks. She wanted him to experience defeat. She didn't want him to face humiliation during the entrance exam. Mara had intended to help him, But now her strategy was backfiring. She didn't anticipate someone who couldn't sense mana could possess such strength. While still trying to comprehend the situation, Ronan asked her how she thought he was performing. He deflected her sword with a fierce look, signaling that he was ready to finish the battle. He warned Mara to dodge his next attack and not to attempt to block it. Luckily, her body reacted instinctively, allowing her to step back just in time. The attack nearly cost her life. She smiled, admitting that Ronan's strike could have been a serious issue, realizing then that he was no ordinary opponent. Ronan reciprocated her compliment, stating that she was skilled even without using mana. However, he pointed out that she was still struggling to find her balance. He suggested that once she addressed that issue, she would improve significantly. Just as he was about to leave, Mara stopped him, still sulking and insisting their fight wasn't over. Ronan, however, showed no interest. As soon as he voiced his indifference, cracks began to appear in her sword. Confused, she looked down at the weapon she had used against him, eyes widening in realization of its damage. Ronan reminded her of her promise to replace the swords if she lost. Mara was about to argue again when someone else caught her attention, a fellow merchant who praised her efforts against Ronan, clearly understanding her frustration. Ronan then called for the merchant to rest, and the two left Mara standing alone, pondering what Ronan really was. The next day, Ronan and Assel returned to the market to collect the promised sword for Mara. However, as he approached, he was puzzled by what lay before him. Along with the swords, Mara had also taken the initiative to provide them with books essential for the entrance exam. These were summarized notes, and she insisted they would need them since the exam was just a month away. As Assel's eyes sparkled with excitement, Ronan asked Mara why she was doing this. He warned her that he suspected she was playing a prank. Mara tried to reassure him, explaining that she genuinely liked them and wanted all three to succeed at the academy. She added that everything she provided was free of charge. Although she wanted to teach them herself, her life as a merchant made that difficult, as she had to constantly travel for trade. Mara playfully bumped her fist against Ronan's, wishing them good luck and urging them to study hard. She also teasingly warned that she wouldn't let them off easy if they failed the exam. Ronan smiled, telling Mara that she didn't need to go out of her way and should focus on herself. Moments later, she was already in the carriage, informing Ronan and Essel that they would see each other at the imperial capital for the exam. Essel waved goodbye, and as all this unfolded, Ronan found himself lost in thought. He realized he had trained his once weak body and now just needed to study. Though these preparations weren't part of his previous life, he didn't mind them. This marked the beginning of his new journey. Once back home, Ronan's days resumed their usual rhythm, but felt slightly different. Unlike before, he now shared meals with his sister, Errol, relishing each moment he had missed. He ate until he was full, enjoying every bite, and burned off those calories by hunting monsters around the village. This approach significantly boosted his stamina and adaptability. Since returning to this timeline, he had come a long way, even managing to drive all the monsters around the village to extinction. After hunting, he dedicated time to studying, a task he never would have considered as a soldier. Although uncertain if all this effort would pay off, he promised to give it his all. A month passed, and they finally arrived at the setting of this tale, the magnificent imperial capital Balon, home to the finest educational institution in the empire, Philin Academy, situated in the heart of the city. Assel stood in front of the impressive building, in disbelief as if he were dreaming. Today marked their entry into Philin Academy, and he marveled at the artistry of the place. While still in awe, his daydream was interrupted by a familiar voice urging him to stop acting like a country bumpkin and just go inside. Assel was happy to see this friend again, but noticed something different about Ronan. He seemed to carry a newfound strength and aura, having grown significantly over the month. Ronan, growing impatient, suggested they keep moving. As he approached the academy, he recalled someone from his past, a sword saint named Shulapin, a member of the renowned swordsmanship clan Grancia, and considered the strongest in the empire. Ronan thought that since Shulapin was around his age, he might run into him here, but he decided to leave that to fate. Assel interrupted his thoughts, asking if Ronan had brought the item they needed. Assel was referring to the feather plucked from the bird they saved that night, which was supposed to help them locate its owner. Ronan pulled out the feather and suggested they find the owner first before heading to the examination area. Rowan noticed that the feather was pointing upwards, indicating that the person they needed to meet lived at the top of the building. Meanwhile, on the top floor, someone was grumbling about the burdens of being a professor. This individual had the bird that Rowan and Assel rescued perched on his shoulder, which began to chirp as it sensed its saviors had arrived in the capital. The bird's owner, a werlion named Varen Fanasir, was the zoology professor at Philin Academy. Just as Varen was about to open the window for some fresh air, he was startled to see Rowan's face greet him from outside. Shocked, Varen instinctively trembled, not expecting someone to enter through the window. He demanded that Rowan reveal his identity. As they settled inside, Rowan complained about the werelion's booming voice, which nearly deafened him, while Essel was still catching his breath from the climb. Varen, still a bit fearful, inquired if they were after his blue bird, Marpus. Upon examining them closely, he noticed the feather Rowan was holding, and his expression brightened as he recognized his unexpected guess as the heroes who saved Marpus from poachers. The Werlion professor began apologizing profusely for his earlier behavior until Rowan told him to forget it. Rowan even shifted some of the blame for their unconventional entrance to Essel, revealing that they had used Essel's telekinesis to float up the tower, though he hesitated to fully explain the situation. Changing the subject, Rowan expressed surprise that a rare Werlion like Varen owned the Bluebird and was also a professor. Varen, in turn, remarked that he hadn't expected the heroes of Marpus to be applicants of Philin Academy. He added that had he known, he would have written them a recommendation letter to ease their admission process. However, Rowan was less interested in that, and instead wanted to ask Varen about something specific. He produced the unusual purple object he had found earlier, which puzzled Varen. Upon closer inspection, Varen realized it was a dream bird egg. He marveled at the egg, as Rowan initially thought it was just an ordinary egg. Varen explained that this was no regular egg. It was a dream egg, the contents of which were unknown until it hatched. He elaborated that while ordinary eggs would typically yield birds, a dream egg absorbed its environment's unique mana to determine what would emerge. For example, if it absorbed lava, it might hatch a fiery phoenix, or if it drew mana from a monster's nest, it could produce a new kind of creature. There were even instances where it might not resemble a bird at all. Varen added that he could predict what might hatch by observing the mana within, but this egg was particularly unique. The variety and quantity of mana present were astounding, featuring even rainbow colors, making it impossible for him to determine the outcome at that moment. Ronan felt overwhelmed by the professor's detailed explanation, commenting that Varen was attributing too much significance to a mere egg. His attention then shifted to Marpus, and he wondered why the bird would lay such an egg and leave it in his care. In his mind, he thought he had never encountered a bird so audacious. Varen then disclosed that he wanted Ronan to continue looking after the egg. To his surprise, Ronan agreed without hesitation, learning that the egg was incredibly precious. A dream bird only laid one egg in its lifetime, signifying Marpus's next generation. Varen believed it was fitting that Marpus chose to lay its egg in front of its heroes, recognizing the special bond it felt with Ronan. Since Marpus had been Varen's companion for years, he wished to honor the bird's choice by entrusting the egg to Ronan. He pondered what type of creature might emerge from the egg. The two then stood up, ready to leave as the exam time approached. Varen asked them to wait a moment. He had been considering what to give them as a token of gratitude for saving Marpus, and came up with something he believed would be useful. The professor pulled out an ancient-looking piece of parchment, surprising Ronan and Essel. Shortly after, the two departed from Varen's building and made their way to the main hall of Galilean Castle, where the practical testing was held. Inside, all the applicants were gathered in the waiting area. The facilitator announced that applicant number 111 had completed their exam, while many hopeful candidates waited anxiously for their turn, some even praying before entering the examination hall. The next applicant appeared visibly nervous, facing the vast hall beyond the doors. Ronan, waiting for his turn, found himself growing bored with the lengthy queue, remarking that they were making him wait too long. Beside him was Maria, the blonde girl he recognized, who was also waiting for a chance. He asked her why she was dressed that way, to which she proudly explained that Philin Academy is a prestigious institution for nobles, so she paid careful attention to her attire. She was hoping to attract a wealthy patron for their merchant business, so her preparation wouldn't go to waste. Maria sighed, wishing to be in the magic testing hall instead, which was located in a different building. After a moment, applicant number 112 finished their practical exam. The facilitator called for the next candidate. Realizing it was his turn, Ronan quickly stood up. Maria encouraged him to remain calm and do his best, playfully warning him that if he failed, she wouldn't let him off easily. He thanked her for her ironic support and turned to assure her he would return. Inside the practical exam room, various banners representing different academy organizations adorned the walls. Ronan scanned the room and noticed 5 professors who would judge whether the applicants were worthy of attending the academy. While they appeared to be ordinary individuals, one stood out: the elderly man in the center, Kravacratier, the headmaster of Philin Academy and an archmage. Another notable figure was the swordsmanship instructor, Rose, the Grand Sword Saint, whose presence exuded an energy Ronan hadn't felt in ages. After assessing the instructors, Ronan introduced himself, and the professors reciprocated. Krava then explained the exam's instructions. Ronan's task was simple: strike the magically enhanced dummy in front of him and showcase any techniques he had learned. As he prepared, he told the professors not to expect anything extraordinary, just a swift cut. His casual remark left the professors puzzled. Most applicants demonstrated techniques involving mana. Amused, the other professors began chuckling, remarking that there was always one applicant like this. One of them quipped that it was typical, especially for someone from a distant region. The dummy appeared ordinary, but it was anything but. Engineered to withstand aura-based attacks, it also had rapid regeneration capabilities. This training dummy was a marvel of magical engineering. Two professors whispered that even the prodigy Shalapin barely made a mark on the dummy with his sword. Krava, embarrassed by their behavior, silently hoped Ronan would surprise them. From Krava's perspective, something felt different as Ronan stood in front of the dummy. There was an unusual energy radiating from the young man. In an instant, Ronan made his move, delivering a single precise strike. It felt as if time had momentarily paused. His cut was so clean and powerful that even Nabairos, the swordsmanship instructor, sensed its force and was visibly startled. Ronan, having completed his demonstration, casually informed the professors that he was finished and had nothing more to show. The professors, still laughing and underestimating him, remarked that a simple cut wouldn't suffice to pass. One blonde professor sought confirmation from the headmaster, but Krava was already in shock, sweat forming on his brow as he stared at Ronan in disbelief. Suddenly, Instructor Nabairos, the Grand Sword Saint, kicked her leg up onto the table, stunning the other professors. In a flash, she vanished from her spot and reappeared in front of Ronan with a fierce expression, her blade poised to strike. With all her strength, she halted her attack just before it could hit. Ronan remained unfazed, standing calmly as if nothing had happened. Ronan then remarked, with a touch of irony, that Nabairos had given him quite a scare. With a serious expression, Nabairos asked who he was and where he had learned his swordsmanship. Her intense questioning left Ronan confused, so she rephrased, asking if he had been able to track her movements. Ronan confirmed, praising her speed and skill. He elaborated, pointing out that from her starting position at the table, it would have been difficult to unsheath her sword quickly, but by the time she reached him, she had already swung her sword 3 times. Nabairos confirmed he was correct. She had, indeed, struck 3 times, just as Ronan had done during his demonstration. What the professors had interpreted as a single strike against the training dummy was actually 3 rapid attacks. Ronan had deliberately slowed his final strike so the professors could follow his movements, a gesture that had unintentionally insulted Nabairos. Meanwhile, Krava remained silent, observing the exchange, while the theory professors remained clueless, unable to grasp the significance of what had happened. Ronan, realizing the misunderstanding, felt awkward. He had slowed his final strike, thinking his sword might not withstand the impact on the dummy, but it was clear from the mood in the room that no one would believe his explanation. Nabairos, still with her sword drawn, finally lowered her blade after a tense few moments. She sheathed it and returned to her seat, but not before warning Ronan that she would remember his name, and she intended to teach him personally. Her tone carried a sense of both frustration and respect. As she sat, still visibly annoyed, Krava took note. He knew that despite her attitude, Nabairos was already considering Ronan as a potential disciple. Maintaining his composure, Krava complimented Ronan on his performance, calling it impressive in many ways, before moving to the next part of the exam. The headmaster then posed a simple but profound question. What did Ronan wish to learn at Filion Academy? Ronan was caught off guard, his expression betraying a sudden, intense memory of his past. He recalled a haunting scene where all his comrades had fallen in battle, leaving him utterly alone. This memory solidified his answer, one driven by deep reflection. He wanted to learn how to live without regrets. Ronan's response stunned the headmaster, filling the room with an uneasy silence. The other professors, sensing the gravity of his words, instructed Ronan to leave, signaling that his entrance exam was over. As Ronan departed, shutting the door behind him, Krava was left contemplating the profound nature of his answer. Teaching someone how to live without regrets was no simple task, and the headmaster chuckled to himself, already considering how he might impart such wisdom. Meanwhile, the theory professors continued to protest, still baffled by Ronan's earlier display. Their disbelief, however, was short-lived. The magically reinforced training dummy they had created began to crumble. A clean cut around its neck was the undeniable proof of Ronan's extraordinary skill. As the head of the dummy fell to the floor, the professor's eyes widened in shock. Ronan, now standing by the door, was still lost in thought, reflecting on Nabairos' swordsmanship. He wondered if, in his past life, he could have matched her in battle. Despite all the experiences and challenges he had faced before, this encounter left him questioning just how far his strength could take him. In front of Nabairos, Ronan felt small and insignificant, a stark reminder that he still had a long journey ahead. He chuckled to himself, realizing he'd made the right decision in joining the academy, all thanks to his captain, who had given him another chance at life. With a newfound sense of purpose, Ronan began walking, a smile forming on his face, confident that this place would teach him much more. He headed towards the venue for the written exam, feeling quite assured. After all, he had spent the entire month memorizing everything. He even thought to himself that getting into Filion Academy would be a breeze. However, after completing the exam, Ronan found himself in a completely different state. He looked as though he had fought an impossible battle. Marriott and Essel stood before him, watching as hopelessness consumed him. Ronan muttered that he had completely blown it. Despite Marriott having given him all the necessary books to prepare, Ronan had only managed to answer half of the questions. The reason? He had only reviewed one book from the entire stack in his bag. He had become so focused on that single text that he neglected the rest of the material. Essel blamed himself for not checking in on Ronan during their study sessions, while Marriott, visibly annoyed, thought Ronan had been foolish. She quickly deduced why he had been acting this way since finishing the written exam. But Marriott assured him it wasn't too late. The exam results hadn't been announced yet. She tried to lift his spirits, reminding him that brooding wouldn't solve anything. Moreover, she revealed that practical skills carried more weight than the written test. Just as she finished speaking, a bright blue light filled the hall nearby. A magic circle appeared beneath them, and someone excitedly announced that the results were finally out. This grabbed the trio's attention, and soon, a massive magical board appeared in front of the applicants, displaying the names of those who had passed. Essel and Marriott scanned the board, surprised the results had been released so quickly. Essel discovered he ranked 12th in the practical exam and had secured the top spot in the written test. Marriott, on the other hand, placed 9th in both the practical and written portions. Realizing what this meant, the two exchanged glances, and Marriott blushed. She had officially passed the entrance exam. The pair began celebrating, delighted that they were now officially students of Fillion Academy. Marriott playfully remarked how Essel had truly excelled in the written portion. As Essel examined the rankings more closely, he noticed he was tied with 2 other students, but Marriott continued to tease him, pointing out that his success was no small feat. Then, turning her attention to Ronan, Marriott asked if he had seen his name on the board. From their perspective, Ronan seemed frozen, standing motionless with an unclear expression. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow, as though his spirit had left his body. He commented that it was no surprise his name wasn't listed, given how badly he had messed up the written exam. Marriott, in disbelief, struggled to accept his words. Out of everyone, Marriott had fully expected Ronan to succeed. Trying to shake some sense into him, she urged Ronan to take a closer look. But his hope had already dwindled, and he muttered that he had checked every corner of the board. As she scolded him for failing to pass, a sudden fireball descended from the sky, catching everyone's attention. When the fireball struck the ground, the tension among the applicants shifted towards the disturbance. Ronan was puzzled by the commotion, and Marriott quickly explained that it was the final congratulatory firework for those who passed the admission test. Their eyes widened as they beheld a majestic creature, a glory phoenix, folding its wings in front of them. Moments later, the beast conjured another volley of fireballs, one of which was headed straight for Ronan. Too preoccupied to notice, he remained unaware of the impending impact. A massive explosion erupted nearby, but the fireball didn't hit Ronan directly. Instead, it signaled an announcement. To everyone's shock, it was revealed that Ronan had secured 2nd place in the martial arts department. He ranked 1st in the practical exams, but a distant 5,712th in the written exams. Both Marriott and Essel were left speechless, struggling to process the unexpected news. Then, as reality sunk in, they embraced Ronan, celebrating his remarkable achievement. Despite his abysmal written test score, they praised him for his exceptional skills, which had clearly carried him through. Marriott remarked that she had always known Ronan was a genius, and this only confirmed her belief. While Ronan was relieved to see his name on the board, a troubling realization hit him. Ranking 1st in the practical exam meant that he had just overtaken someone who was expected to claim the top spot. Knowing that individual's temperament, Ronan anticipated trouble. And sure enough, the person he was thinking of was already approaching from behind. A figure slowly made his way toward them, commenting on Ronan's performance in the practical exams. Ronan immediately sensed an ominous aura filling the air. The man exuded a dignified and formidable presence. This wasn't just anyone. It was Shulapin, the one destined to become the strongest swordsman and the sword saint from Ronan's previous life. The long-awaited encounter between these two swordsmen, destined to shape the future of their world, had finally occurred. The nearby students of Fillion Academy were astonished to see such a man on campus. He was known as the Empire's rising star. Meru informed Ronan that this mysterious figure seemed eager to talk to him. From Essel's point of view, the atmosphere around the man was unsettling. Ronan, too, felt uneasy, sensing that this meeting would cause him trouble. He recalled that Shalapin couldn't stand anyone better than him in swordsmanship. As Ronan looked at him, he noted that Shalapin still had that fierce spirit. Ronan thought it best to avoid him and pretended not to know he ranked 1st in the practical exam. However, this didn't fool Shalapin, who kept his eyes locked on Ronan, accusing him of lying. Realizing he'd been found out, Ronan tried to talk his way out, telling Shalapin to stop picking fights and that he had no proof. In response, Shalapin drew his sword, showing his proof by attacking Ronan in an instant. Luckily, Ronan blocked the strike, surprised by how quickly the situation escalated. Marriott and Essel watched helplessly from afar. Shalapin then asked if that was enough proof, claiming that Ronan's rank made it possible to block such an attack. The onlookers panicked as a simple confrontation turned into a fight. Shalapin demanded Ronan display the skills that had bested him. Meanwhile, Ronan couldn't help but think how eccentric the sword saint was. With no other choice, Ronan accepted the challenge and counterattacked. Shalapin's frustration was clear, but Ronan unleashed a series of slashes, the same ones he had used during the practical exam. Shalapin narrowly deflected them with a single stroke, his arm trembling from the power of the blow. Speechless, he admitted that Ronan's attack made sense for his high score, but something still felt off. Refusing to accept defeat, Shalapin pressed on, saying the slashes weren't enough to defeat him, and their swords clashed again. Ronan pleaded for a moment's peace, but Shalapin insisted he show his real abilities, driven by his obsession with becoming the Empire's strongest swordsman. As they exchanged blows, each strike held the potential to end the fight. Ronan realized this was exactly why he'd wanted to avoid Shalapin. He knew that soon, Shalapin would tap into his aura, a power Ronan wasn't ready to face. Remembering the Tempest Sword, a dangerous technique from his past life, Ronan knew he couldn't handle it with his current strength. So, he turned and fled. Shalapin, furious, couldn't believe the one who had beaten him would retreat so easily. Ronan, in an unexpected move, used a nearby student, a male named Aesel, as a shield. Shalapin called it cowardly, saying no true knight would hide behind someone. But Ronan, with a mischievous grin, retorted that Shalapin's dedication to knighthood was unshakable. Seizing the moment, Ronan punched Shalapin while hiding behind Aesel, landing a clean hit. Shalapin stumbled, shocked by the blow, and fell to his knees. Seeing this, Ronan turned to his friends and yelled, "Now's our chance." The group took off running, leaving Shalapin too stunned to stop them. Moments later, a guard arrived after hearing about the fight, only to find the mighty Shalapin kneeling on the ground. Concerned, he rushed to check on him. The guard asked Shalapin to describe his attackers so they could track them down, but Shalapin disliked the idea. He didn't want to be treated like nobility, insisting that he was merely an applicant to the academy. Standing up, he reassured everyone that they had no reason to worry. It was just a fair duel between swordsmen. Shalapin claimed he could handle himself, brushing off the dust from his clothes. But as he did, something caught his eye, a crack in his sword. This was surprising since the sword was crafted from high-grade mithril. He then recalled Ronan's attack, which he initially thought was ordinary, but now realized was far from it. Shalapin smiled, intrigued by this unexpected development, and declared that he would remember Ronan's name from now on. The next day in Shimo Forest, just outside the capital, Ronan and Aesel could be heard walking. Ronan held a map as they appeared to be searching for something. Aesel, out of breath, asked if they should really be exploring, still thinking about how Ronan had punched Shalapin, heir to the Granshaw family, the day before. The punch had been so strong that it almost broke Shalapin's nose. Aesel worried about retaliation, but Ronan brushed it off, assuring him that Shalapin was a good person, obsessed with swords but principled and trustworthy. Ronan added that Shalapin likely told the guards it was just a fair fight. Aesel calmed down, realizing Ronan's words might be true. Ronan then pointed out that they had reached the spot Professor Varan had mentioned. The two were greeted by the shining blue waters of Fernardo Spring. Ronan excitedly announced that they had found it. He explained that a mana vein was responsible for the magic-infused water, which could transform ordinary materials into high-grade minerals or medicinal herbs. This spring, with its concentration of mana, was extremely valuable, and those who discovered it would surely try to monopolize it. Ronan felt grateful to Professor Varan for generously giving them the map, just to hatch a single dream egg. Aesel dipped his hand into the water and marveled at the concentrated mana. He thought training here could make his magic much stronger. He then noticed the egg in Ronan's pocket glowing as it absorbed the spring's magic. Aesel pointed this out, but Ronan explained he couldn't sense mana. He then thought of Maria, who couldn't join them due to her commitments with the merchantry. Despite agreeing, Aesel sensed something was off and asked Ronan if he noticed anything strange. Remembering Professor Varan's warnings, Ronan realized the eerie silence. They hadn't heard any animals. Alarmed, he told Aesel things were about to get dangerous and warned him to be ready, having detected the scent of blood. Nearby, the bodies of animals lay scattered, and shadowy figures were responsible. Aesel, confused, listened to Ronan's grim assessment of the situation. Ronan, with a sharp expression, deduced that others had already reached the spring. Unbeknownst to them, 5 masked men had already taken positions, purple arrows aimed at the duo. Suddenly, the arrows were launched straight at Ronan. Calmly, he waited until the last moment, then drew his sword, making a massive slash that cut through the arrows, protecting himself. As he inspected the arrows, Ronan realized they looked familiar. He recalled, in his past life, encountering the same kind of arrows during his time with a disciplinary squad. One of his companions had boasted about these special arrows, which were powerful enough to blow up the heads of orcs, and had even challenged Ronan to test them. Back in the present, Ronan was slightly annoyed to find that he was about to face the same poaching group again. This time, however, these men were far stronger than the two he had encountered before. Sighing, Ronan realized he didn't have much of a choice. He instructed Aesel to hide somewhere safe and warned him to avoid becoming a porcupine from the arrows their opponents were likely to fire. As Ronan rushed forward, eager to defeat the organization once more, the archers were puzzled by how he had deflected all their arrows with just one slash, even though the arrows were infused with mana. As Ronan quickly moved between the branches like a predator closing in on its prey, the purple-haired leader spotted him and commanded his men to scatter and surround Ronan. Impressed by the leader's quick thinking, Ronan noted that he might be stronger than those he'd fought before. Realizing the situation wasn't in his favor, Ronan called out, claiming that he was one of them, which caught the leader's attention. Ronan then introduced himself as a young bloodhound from the Dama branch, using the name Ahayat, a giant he had defeated in his past life. His bluff seemed to work as the masked men hesitated, trying to confirm his story. The leader, skeptical, said there was no way someone so young could be a bloodhound and would have believed it more if Ronan had claimed a lower rank. Ronan chuckled, suggesting they confirm his rank with their branch's wolf, but warned the leader that questioning his superior's identity was a bad habit. Though the leader was fuming, one of his subordinates stopped him, pointing out that they couldn't completely rule out the possibility that Ronan was telling the truth. In the Calaboros organization, grunts were called feral dogs, those ranked above them were bloodhounds, and branch leaders were called wolves. Ronan knew all this from his past life battling the Calaboros. The subordinate suggested they confirm Ronan's identity with their captain, as harming someone higher ranked could cause a feud between branches. Just then, a bald man named Viam emerged from the bushes, drawing everyone's attention. He was the true leader of the group, the wolf of the Demire branch. The purple-haired leader smiled, noting the poor timing, as Viam's presence meant everything Ronan had said would now be revealed. Viam questioned if Ronan was truly a Hyatt from the Dama branch, and Ronan confirmed it, but Viam found it strange since the Demire branch had already claimed this territory. Viam then smiled and revealed that Ronan's story didn't add up because he wasn't a bloodhound, nor was he a Hyatt. Furious at the revelation, Viam and his men prepared for battle, but before they could react, Ronan unleashed a powerful slash that struck down the feral dogs. Smirking, Ronan admitted he had made the whole thing up. The only ones left standing were Viam and the purple-haired man, who barely had time to draw their weapons before Ronan appeared in front of them. Grinning, Ronan was pleased that his acting skills had fooled them so easily. In one swift move, he defeated Viam, one of the Calaboros' strongest, leaving the purple-haired man trembling as he processed what had just happened. Ronan's voice taunted him as the last of his strength faded. Ronan reminded the purple-haired man of what he'd said earlier. The arrogant always meet the worst fate. An attack followed, and the man stared at his hand in horror as his fingers began to fall off. Screaming in pain, he dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by the shock and loss. Meanwhile, Ronan stood still as if nothing had happened, then urged him to pull himself together. Ronan pulled out a piece of paper and commanded the man to draw a map marking all the Calaboros organization branches. Grinning, Ronan asked if he really didn't want to do the task, adding that if the man was no longer useful, there was no reason to keep him alive. Terrified, the man agreed to draw the map but claimed he had nothing to write with. Ronan smirked and replied that he had already provided a pen, referring to the blood from the man's severed hand. Moments later, the man completed the map, marking all the Calaboros bases on the mountain. Ronan praised him for his work, commenting on his talent, but when the man asked if he was free to leave as promised, a red slash cut through the air. The man was split in two, as Ronan coldly sealed his fate. Shortly after, Ronan reunited with Aesel, who was retching at the sight they encountered in the forest, a pile of animal carcasses. Aesel, shocked, asked if this was the work of the Calaboros organization. Ronan confirmed it and added that leaving such criminals alive would be a crime. Aesel protested, but Ronan cut him off, stating that even the government would want these people dead. In deep thought, Ronan remembered Professor Varan and lamented that seeing this would break his heart. Among the slain animals were species that looked like Marpus, making the scene even more tragic. Just as Ronan was about to suggest returning to the capital, the dream egg in his pocket began to move. Curious, he took it out to check its status. Aesel, trembling, pointed at something, asking in a shaky voice what was happening. Ronan followed Aesel's gaze and was shocked to see the blood of the dead animals floating in the air, forming a massive monovein. The blood's movement became more aggressive, rushing towards something. As Aesel panicked, Ronan stepped forward, preparing to defend them, but in the process, accidentally dropped the dream egg. Instead of hitting the ground, the egg emitted a bright purple light. The blood began to encircle the egg, and Ronan realized that the dream egg was absorbing the pure mana from it. The absorption grew faster, and soon the light from the egg was nearly blinding. Assel asked what was happening, but Ronan, just as confused, only smiled, saying one thing was certain. Whatever creature was inside the egg was far from ordinary. As the last drop of blood was absorbed, the egg seemed unchanged, but just as Ronan was about to comment, cracks began to form across its surface. The egg started to shake, and the cracks spread further. Both Ronan and Assel held their breath, knowing it was about to hatch. From inside the egg's perspective, the first thing it saw was Ronan's face, grinning with excitement. The creature emerged, rushing towards Ronan and bumping into his face, a surprising greeting that almost broke his nose. Still, Ronan wondered what had hatched from the egg. The first thing he noticed were its dark, galaxy-colored wings. As the rest of its body was revealed, it became clear that the creature was mythical. However, it didn't resemble a marpus, leading Assel to comment that it looked more like a dragon. When Ronan asked if he was sure, Assel confirmed, saying the creature matched descriptions from books. Ronan grew confused as he recalled Marpus's traits, wondering what kind of mana the egg had absorbed to transform like this. Still, both he and Assel found the baby dragon adorably cute. However, the mood shifted when Ronan remembered the dragon's greeting that almost broke his nose. Suddenly, the dragon closed its eyes, and a magic circle appeared in front of it. A mysterious force rushed toward Ronan, healing the injury from the dragon's earlier impact. Assel was amazed to discover that the baby dragon had healing abilities and commented that the dragon seemed to have taken a liking to Ronan. Pleased, Ronan noted that the creature likely had more hidden abilities. Assel suggested they name the dragon, as calling it Dream Bird no longer seemed fitting. While Ronan pondered the perfect name, the dragon's expression changed as if sensing something nearby. Without warning, it flew off at incredible speed. Assel wondered where it was going, but Ronan smiled, realizing the dragon had detected someone watching them. The sound of hurried footsteps came from a man named Balrouse, an errand boy from the Demire branch. Frightened by the scene he had witnessed, the absorption of blood and the dragon hatching, Balrouse fled for his life, but the baby dragon pursued him. As he ran, Balrouse tripped on a tree root and fell, realizing he might not survive. He turned to see the dragon absorbing his blood from a cut he had received. Panicking, Balrouse screamed for help. Suddenly, a voice commanded the dragon to stop. It was Ronan along with Assel. Ronan told the baby dragon, now named Sita, to stop before he killed the man. This surprised Assel, as it was the first time Ronan had called the dragon by its new name. Balrouse, trembling, wondered if Ronan owned the creature. His thoughts were interrupted when Ronan asked if he was all right. Grateful, Balrouse knelt and thanked Ronan for saving him. Then, Balrouse grew suspicious. How did Ronan know his name when they had never met before? His question was answered with a sword at his neck. Ronan stated that it didn't matter how he knew Balrouse's name. The terrified man remained silent, sensing Ronan's seriousness. In truth, Ronan recognized Balrouse as a former comrade from his past life, a member of the poaching organization who had introduced deadly arrows. Ronan knew that Balrouse would eventually be promoted and become a bloodhound. Balrouse, confused, insisted he was just an errand boy, but Ronan smiled, seeing this as an opportunity. He gave Balrouse a task, making it clear that it wasn't a favor or optional. Later that night, Ronan and Assel returned to the capital, with Ronan holding several gold coins. He remarked that their trip had been more fruitful than expected. Assel agreed, noting the surprises they had encountered. While near the lake earlier, Ronan had secured some pure mana from a vein and sold it for a hefty price. They visited Mero's father to have the mana appraised and received a significant sum. With their newfound wealth, Assel noted that money wouldn't be a problem for them anymore. Ronan agreed, planning to thank Professor Veron for the opportunity. However, when they arrived to see him, they learned that the professor was away on a business trip, so they missed the chance to introduce Sita. Everything had gone according to Ronan's plan, including obtaining a map of the other branches of the poaching group and gaining a new pawn in Balrouse. He made sure Balrouse was scared enough to complete his secret mission. Later, Assel asked Ronan what he planned to do with his money, noting that the second highest scorer in the Academy entrance exam would be exempt from tuition and receive direct support from the Academy. For the first time, Ronan thought about it, wondering what his next steps would be. As they prepared for the upcoming entrance ceremony, a carriage arrived in downtown Valen. A butler greeted a woman, informing her that they had reached their destination. She had bright silver hair and beautiful eyes. It was her first time visiting the capital. The lady in question was none other than Ronan's older sister, Errol. As she stepped out of the carriage, she marveled at the fresh and unfamiliar sights around her. Ronan greeted her, noting that she must be tired from the journey. He asked if anything noteworthy had happened in their town while he was away. Errol, however, turned the question back on him, curious about how he managed to afford such a luxurious carriage. Shocked by the sight of it parked outside their house, she couldn't believe her little brother had earned so much money. Like a typical sister, Errol inspected Ronan, concerned about his weight and whether he was eating properly. Ronan reassured her that he was fine, which eased her worries. Her attention then shifted to the baby dragon Sita. Ronan introduced the creature, explaining that Sita now traveled with him due to certain circumstances. After their brief reunion, Ronan told Errol they had a lot to take care of and needed to move quickly. Errol, confused, felt rushed, but Ronan assured her that everything was important. He explained that once he entered the academy, he would be extremely busy. They visited a shop in the capital, and Errol, overwhelmed by the extravagance, asked Ronan if everything there was real. While she tried on clothes, Ronan relaxed on a couch, waiting. Although Errol knew Ronan had made a lot of money, she still found the experience excessive. She emerged from the fitting room in a stunning dress, wondering about its price. Meanwhile, Ronan was busy making arrangements to have their purchases delivered. When Errol saw the mountain of clothes, she began to panic. She hadn't expected to receive so much. For Ronan, however, it was just his way of repaying her for all the kindness she had shown him. Hearing such a mature sentiment from her younger brother filled Errol with pride, and tears welled up in her eyes as she marveled at how much he had grown. Overcome with emotion, Errol ran toward the door, shouting about how proud she was of Ronan. Embarrassed, Ronan tried to stop her, while the store staff found the scene adorable, commenting on the siblings' close bond. Errol asked where they were headed next, and Ronan mentioned he needed to visit a blacksmith to look for a new sword. He was just about to tell her about meeting a strange swordsman when, upon opening the door, the swordsman in question stood before him. Schleipen greeted Ronan, asking if he had finished shopping. Momentarily speechless, Ronan panicked, not expecting to see him there. Schleipen explained that he had ordered a sword nearby and had coincidentally seen Ronan, so he decided to wait. He asked Ronan to stop being so suspicious of him, but Ronan remained unconvinced, thinking Schleipen had the makings of a stalker. Annoyed, Ronan was about to show Schleipen the damage to his sword when their tension escalated. They were on the verge of another spar when Errol intervened, scolding Ronan for his foul language. Ronan tried to defend himself, claiming that Schleipen had started it, but he was cut off. It was then that Schleipen realized the woman standing before him was Ronan's older sister. After chastising Ronan, Errol apologized to Schleipen, explaining that Ronan had a foul mouth but was a kind person. When Schleipen saw Errol's face, he felt as though he were seeing a goddess descend from the heavens. The future sword saint blushed, overwhelmed by admiration. Several seconds passed before Schleipen regained his composure. Errol, still apologizing, bowed and asked for forgiveness. Schleipen assured her that the misunderstanding was his fault, taking full responsibility. Errol's face lit up, pleased to find that Ronan's friend had a kind heart. Overjoyed, she accidentally held Schleipen's hand, thanking him. While they exchanged kind words, Ronan watched with growing curiosity. He noticed Schleipen, still flustered, promised to replace his sword, though there was a problem. Schleipen wasn't carrying any gold with him at the time. The noble young man then pulled out a golden emblem, revealing it as his family's insignia. He handed it to Errol, explaining that she could use it anywhere in the Empire. Ronan, standing nearby, was completely stunned by what was happening. To top it off, Schleipen suggested they visit the blacksmith at the western end of the street if they were looking to buy a sword. He mentioned the shop had a 500-year history and was the best in the Empire. After bidding them farewell, still flustered, Schleipen left. Ronan, watching him go, was bewildered. He wondered if Schleipen truly grasped the value of what he had just given. With the Grant family emblem, they could likely purchase several villages. As Schleipen awkwardly walked out of the shop, Ronan questioned if this was the same sword saint he had known in his previous life. The following day was the entrance ceremony at Philin Academy. All the students who had passed the exam gathered in the plaza. They were greeted by the headmaster, Prava, who proudly announced that the freshmen standing before him were now officially part of Class 787. With a beaming smile, he introduced himself again and expressed how glad he was to see them all. He specifically praised 3 students for their exceptional talents, predicting that with Philin Academy's prestigious education, they would achieve greatness and be remembered in the Empire's history. As Prava welcomed everyone once more, Ronan couldn't help but yawn, thinking the speech was over the top. However, knowing his sister was watching, he felt it wasn't so bad, as she clearly felt proud of him. Prava then snapped his fingers, and suddenly, a mysterious and colorful light began to surround the students. Ronan and the others watched in awe as a massive crack appeared in the sky, seeming to shatter the space around them. In a flash, the students were transported to a huge coliseum, where a cheering crowd awaited them. Ronan and Essel were amazed by Prava's power. He had teleported everyone effortlessly. With a sly smile, the headmaster announced the beginning of the senior-junior meeting. This event was an intense tradition where incoming freshmen met the Year 2 seniors for the first time, with a special duel between the top-ranked freshmen and the 4 strongest sophomores. The duel was a way for students to learn from each other, understand their strengths and weaknesses, and form bonds between juniors and seniors. Prabha emphasized that this was also a chance for students to take their first step toward greatness. According to tradition, freshmen could choose their opponent or opt to skip the duel entirely. Prabha then invited Ronan and Schleipen to choose their opponents. Ronan, irritated by the long speech, saw the event as nothing more than hazing for the new students. Among the potential opponents were Nasto, the top-ranked sophomore who majored in martial arts, and Brown, the buff second-ranked student who kept shouting that he wanted to fight both freshmen at once. There were also Karen, ranked 4th, and Irina, a fiery redhead and the 3rd strongest. Ronan felt uneasy about Brown's aggressive demeanor, but knew his sister was watching, and he wanted to show her he could protect himself. He also saw this as an opportunity to make friends. After thinking it over, Ronan raised his hand to get Prabha's attention, proposing an unexpected suggestion. Repeating the headmaster's earlier words that freshmen could choose their opponents freely, Ronan shocked everyone by declaring that he wanted to fight all 4 sophomores at once. The atmosphere in the Coliseum shifted dramatically. None of the seniors expected such a bold request from a freshman. The professors had no choice but to consult each other, as this was the first time anyone had ever made such a request. Prabha consulted Professor Naburo about the situation, and the alluring professor agreed. She advised the headmaster that they should honor Ronan's request, as it aligned with the academy's principle that those with skills should have the freedom to act as they wish. Moreover, whoever won the duel would send a powerful message to the other students. Naburo also reassured everyone that she would step in if anything went wrong. After considering her input, the headmaster decided to approve the duel. With that settled, Ronan and the sophomore students gathered in the arena. The 4 sophomores felt insulted, clearly annoyed by what they saw as a young upstart's arrogance. Karen and Irina expressed their anger, thinking Ronan needed a lesson in humility. However, Nasto, the top-ranked sophomore, told them to focus. He reminded them that even Schleipen seemed to acknowledge Ronan's skill, as he had outperformed him in the practical exam. Nasto ordered them all to give it their best, knowing this duel could be crucial for their future. Meanwhile, Ronan's sister, Iroh, was anxious about the intense atmosphere. She cheered for her brother, advising him to forfeit if things got too dangerous. Ronan smiled in response, reassuring her that he understood. This helped Iroh calm down. The duel commenced with Nasto charging at Ronan at incredible speed, but Ronan dodged his attack effortlessly, realizing how sharp and powerful his opponents were. As Irina joined the fray with a series of attacks, Ronan blocked her strikes with ease, observing the impressive teamwork between the sophomores. Karen, coordinating with Irina, moved in with a spear attack that forced Ronan to step back. Before he could recover, Brown, the muscle-bound sophomore, approached with his massive sword, disappointed that Ronan didn't seem to be taking the fight seriously. He unleashed a powerful blow, but Ronan stayed calm, recognizing the strength and precision of their attacks. In that moment, time seemed to freeze for Ronan. He quickly analyzed his opponent's positions and, in an instant, vanished from where he had been standing. Brown's attack hit only the ground, leaving the sophomore stunned. Irina was the first to notice Ronan's sudden movement, wondering how he had moved so quickly. In the blink of an eye, the 3 sophomores realized they had been struck by Ronan's sword, and their weapons were shattered. Despite their damaged weapons, the fight wasn't over. Brown, still determined, charged at Ronan with a menacing expression. Ronan acknowledged his resolve and decided to meet him head-on instead of dodging. Brown hesitated for a moment, recognizing the familiar stance Ronan had adopted, the same one Professor Naburo had used to intimidate him. Ronan smiled and, with his eyes closed, unleashed a high-level technique, 3 precise and rapid slashes that left cracks in Brown's massive sword. Brown could only smirk in disbelief. Ronan then thanked his seniors, acknowledging their strength and stating that he had learned a lot from the duel. However, it was clear that Ronan was a prodigy, and his talent, along with some plot armor, was simply overwhelming. Iroh was still processing what had just happened in those brief moments. A few seconds later, the place erupted into cheers, with everyone admiring Ronan. The other students were now curious about this new freshman. As for the 4 sophomores, all their weapons had been destroyed, meaning they were completely defeated. Nasto, however, wasn't embarrassed by the one-sided fight. Instead, he marveled at Ronan's monstrous strength, wondering where such talent had come from. Ronan, meanwhile, remained quiet, his gaze fixed on his sister. He noticed Iroh excitedly chatting with the person next to her, clearly proud of him. Ronan then turned his attention to his seniors, thanking them for their effort and showing them respect. An unexpected move. He explained that he had only suggested the duel because he was excited to be a fill-in, but he was humbled by their strength. Maria and Isel, watching from the sidelines, were surprised by Ronan's courtesies, which seemed out of character. In the end, Ronan bowed to the 4 sophomores, asking for forgiveness for his boldness and requesting their support in the future. Nasto, Karen, and Irina were left speechless by his humility, but Brown broke the silence. He appreciated Ronan's politeness and strength, shaking his hand and declaring that Ronan had won fair and square. Brown raised Ronan's hand in victory, stating that this was what being a fill-in student was all about. Ronan's display of humility and strength helped him build a bond with the other students, exactly as he had planned. He wanted his sister to see that he could socialize well. And it worked. Iroh was already in tears, proud of how much her younger brother had grown. The person sitting next to her, however, looked a bit uncomfortable, as his shirt had been stretched out by Iroh's enthusiasm. Amidst this heartwarming scene, a mysterious student in the crowd took notice of Ronan, intrigued by his talent. Later that evening, the students gathered in their dormitories for a grand dinner prepared by the academy. It was a lavish feast that made all their hard work for the entrance exam feel worthwhile. Ronan, Assel, and Mary were also enjoying the meal. Though Ronan had expected the feast to be impressive, it was even grander than he had imagined. Mary commented that such luxury was typical of the Empire's best institution. Assel shifted the conversation to Ronan's sister, and Ronan mentioned that he had already sent her off safely, leaving a cool baby dragon with her for protection. Assel praised Ronan for being a great brother to Iroh. Just as Ronan was about to taste his food, Schleipen appeared beside him with a somewhat ominous aura. He questioned how Ronan could be so relaxed while eating. Annoyed, Ronan asked Schleipen what he wanted this time. Schleipen, holding a pen and notebook, started asking personal questions about Iroh's residence and whether it was far from the academy, trying to assess the safety of her journey. Baffled by these inquiries, Ronan responded that he had hired guards stronger than Schleipen and that nothing would happen to Iroh unless a wyvern appeared. This comment made Schleipen even more anxious, as he genuinely feared for Iroh's safety if a wyvern were involved. Frustrated, Ronan asked Schleipen why he cared so much about his sister, noting that he wasn't even her husband. This remark left Schleipen speechless, though he quietly replied that he was only concerned for her well-being. While the two were still talking, a woman with purple hair entered the dining area, smiling at the scene. She found it amusing to see the usually quiet wolf of Grantia, Schleipen, being so talkative. When Schleipen asked her what she wanted, she revealed that her name was Elizabeth Kalusha, a freshman from the magic class. To Ronan's surprise, she wasn't there for Schleipen, she was there for him. Ronan, shocked, tried to make sense of her words, while Schleipen silently observed the situation unfold. He sighed and remarked that Elizabeth might be indulging in her sinister games again. Having finished checking on Errol's safety, he told them he was leaving. Elizabeth was now free to do as she pleased, but before leaving, he paused and turned back to Ronan, advising him to send more guards for Errol. This only irritated Ronan further. As Ronan tried to brush it off, Assel attempted to get his attention, ready to inform him about the identity of the woman in front of them. But Ronan cut him off, saying it wasn't necessary, he already knew. Elizabeth was a powerful mage, and her recent overwhelming victory against her seniors in battle had demonstrated her strength. Each spell she cast was filled with immense mana, even causing an explosion in part of the Colosseum. Elizabeth then spoke, telling Ronan that those who reveal their claws must be taught a lesson. She hoped Ronan knew what she meant, but he replied that he had no idea. He asked her again why she had come to him. Slowly approaching, Elizabeth expressed how impressed she was by his talent, her smile unsettling. She mentioned she had a special offer for him, something too tempting for someone like Ronan to refuse. Reaching into her pocket, Elizabeth pulled out a purple necklace and showed it to Ronan. His shock was immediate. That purple necklace was a symbol of Akalusha's invitation. Rowan received the Akalusha's invitation from Elizabeth. It was a purple badge, a symbol of great significance to their family. Unlike most nobles who value bloodlines above all, the Akalushas prioritize talent and have risen as one of the Empire's two pillars by nurturing gifted individuals. Their badge is offered only to those showing extraordinary potential. Now, Rowan held the item that could grant him everything needed to grow stronger. He asked Elizabeth if she was allowed to give this badge to others. Her smile revealed she understood that Rowan already knew its value. When he claimed he heard about it from a passerby, it triggered a memory of his past life. Back then, Rowan had seen this badge in a battle camp. His Grand Commander, Ichon Na Akalushes, had shown him the same symbol. Rowan, a mere peasant, had asked if he too could join their family after receiving an invitation. Icha confirmed it was possible for anyone with the badge to prove their worth through a test conducted by the Patriarch. Those chosen were always talented enough to pass. She told Rowan that once his accomplishments made up for his sins, he might also receive an invitation. Her belief in his potential left him breathless. In the present, Rowan stared at the badge. The moment he had awaited for lifetimes was finally here. Elizabeth, seeing his understanding, chose not to explain further. She hoped he would make a wise decision, adding that even a beast could become a sheep if surrounded by the right people. With that, she left him to his thoughts, her minions trailing behind. Rowan pondered the opportunity. He mused that geniuses always acted freely, unaware he shared that same trait. Nearby, Aesel looked relieved now that Elizabeth was gone. Rowan decided this badge could serve as a vital connection and planned to use it strategically. Philin Academy was an institution built on merit. Students' lives were shaped by their performance, evident in the dormitories assigned to them. The intermediate-ranked students lived in Nishia Hall, a clean facility with great amenities. In contrast, the bottom 30% were sent to Crater Hall, a rundown dormitory with shared facilities and cramped rooms. On his first day, a noble student loudly protested his placement in Crater Hall. A staff member calmly explained that no servants would serve the hall and that the only way out was through academic improvement. The rules were non-negotiable, and those who failed would remain there. Meanwhile, the top 10% of students, including Rowan, were placed in NAB Ardozer Hall. Upon seeing its grandeur, Rowan was taken aback. The hall resembled a palace, filled with luxury. As he explored, he found registration papers for selecting classes, realizing all he needed was to fill in his schedule to begin his journey. Rowan had heard the tips given to first years, advising them to focus on adapting during the first semesters and avoid taking too many subjects at once. But as he looked at the available classes, a smile spread across his face. Each one seemed too interesting to ignore. Determined to break the rules, he decided to attend them all. With steady hands, he filled out the forms and, satisfied, thought it might be excessive, but he couldn't let such opportunities slip away. On the day of his first class, the Empire's swordsmanship instructor, Basics, made a shocking remark. "It's already over for you." Rowan, confused, asked what he meant. Basics smiled and explained that, even though the class had just started, Rowan had already demonstrated all the basic techniques of the Empire's swordsmanship. According to Academy rules, students who completed a class's syllabus were required to leave. Basics added that letting Rowan stay might demotivate the other students. With a smile and a thumbs up, he suggested Rowan move on. The day passed quickly, and Rowan found himself sitting by a lake, surrounded by a gloomy atmosphere. Disappointed, he recalled that it wasn't just the swordsmanship class that had dismissed him, but also archery and monster hunting. Annoyed, he muttered that this wasn't how he had imagined his time at the academy. While he was still complaining, a voice from behind asked why he wasn't in class. Turning, he saw Instructor Nabairos standing there. Nabairos smiled as she realized why Rowan was wandering around. He had already completed all the classes. Rowan confirmed this and voiced his disappointment, saying he had expected more from the academy. Nabairos, however, saw this as completely natural. Rowan had the rare talent to replicate techniques simply by watching them. She said she couldn't ignore such potential as an instructor. Extending her hand, she asked for his sword. Although confused, Rowan complied. Before he could ask why, a powerful strike passed by him and struck the lake, creating a massive explosion that left him stunned. Nabairos calmly explained that this was the limit of what a piece of metal could achieve. She added that Rowan's sword wasn't worthy of being called a weapon, as it only drained the wielder's power. Rowan listened intently, realizing he was about to learn something valuable. Nabairos unsheathed her own sword, and the air grew tense. Rowan watched in disbelief as she unleashed a single slash. The sheer power of the attack split the lake in two, displaying a force far beyond anything his sword could produce. Water droplets rained down on Rowan's head as silence enveloped the scene. Nabairos, with a steady gaze, asked if he understood her point. She revealed Rowan's greatest weakness, his weapon. He needed a personalized blade, one capable of unlocking his full potential. Until now, Rowan had viewed weapons as disposable tools, but this demonstration shattered that belief. It became clear that a perfect weapon could transform a person's strength entirely. Rowan found the situation utterly absurd. He was certain Nabairos used the same sword for both slashes, but her second attack was on a completely different level. Before he could ponder further, Nabairos interrupted his thoughts, explaining that even the smallest details, a single breath or a fraction of strength, could decide life or death on the battlefield. Ignoring such nuances could mean wasting one's potential entirely. She emphasized that if Rowan ever intended to use mana, he needed a weapon suited for him. However, she pointed out that he wasn't ready to grasp this lesson yet, as he still couldn't use mana. Hearing this, Rowan asked how she knew, and Nabairos confirmed her insight. Even so, she praised him for his exceptional skills, assuring him that one day he'd unlock his ability to use mana. To prepare for that moment, she commanded him to find the perfect weapon. Rowan's silence didn't go unnoticed, prompting Nabairos to tease that he was likely overthinking. Then she surprised him with an unexpected offer, an invitation to join her class. Rowan hesitated, unsure if he was eligible, but Nabairos reassured him, even though her classes were typically for second years and above. Her only condition? Rowan couldn't bring his current lump of steel. He needed a proper weapon. The following day, the city basked in fine weather. Rowan, accompanied by Ezel and Maria, stood before a worn-down forge. Explaining what Nabairos had told him, he led his friends to find a new weapon, starting with a shop recommended by Zyolophan. But the directions brought them to a shabby-looking building that barely inspired confidence. Ezel and Maria remarked that the forge seemed ready to collapse, Doubting this was the blacksmith shop the legendary sword saint frequented. Despite their doubts, Rowan decided to check. As they stepped inside, cobwebs covered the ceiling, and the interior looked even worse than expected. Still, Rowan trusted Xiolophin's words. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a hairy hand with long claws emerged. Its owner grumbled about the noise before stepping fully into view, a towering wolf beast man. His impatient growl froze the group in place. Easel panicked, while Rowan marveled at the unusual sight of a wolf beast man running a forge. The beastman's irritation grew as his questions went unanswered, and he began ushering them out. But he stopped when Rowan presented a token from Xiolophin, explaining they were there to buy a weapon. Rowan added that the sword saint had praised the shop's craftsmanship. The beast man inspected the token and sneered, unimpressed. Though curious about the mana emanating from Easel and Maria, he dismissed Rowan, questioning his connection to the Grantia family. The wolf yawned, mockingly suggesting Rowan should leave, as they didn't serve customers like him. Tensions rose, but before Rowan could negotiate further, the wolf licked his lips and proposed a sinister deal. He'd consider the request if Rowan gave him Easel's arm. The beast man, laughing, claimed he was hungry and thought Rowan's desperation might make him agree. Easel cowered behind Rowan in fear, but the laughter stopped when Rowan's tone turned serious. With cold determination, Rowan warned the beast man he had crossed a line. In a flash, Rowan attacked, landing a clean blow. The wolf, unable to react in time, was thrown several meters back, groaning in pain. Smirking, Rowan remarked on the familiar sensation of striking hard armor and questioned where the wolf's defensive gear had suddenly come from. The beast man, now clad in armor, coughed and tried to recover. But Rowan, unfazed, approached with confidence, declaring that the armor wouldn't save him. The wolf's attention was captured. With an annoyed and furious expression, Rowan decided he'd destroy the armor entirely, sending the beast man into a panic. The wolf immediately pleaded for forgiveness, revealing that everything was just a test. He explained that he was following a protocol for unfamiliar visitors, ensuring their skills were up to par. Apparently, the wolf had been testing Rowan's abilities while also trying out his new invisible armor, purposely provoking the group. Realizing the beast man didn't have any malicious intent, Rowan calmed down, though he remained skeptical. The wolf defended his actions by pointing out that it would be suspicious if a blacksmith trusted by the Grantia family didn't have strict verification measures. To alleviate Rowan's doubts, the wolf suggested confirming the story with Xiolophin later. Apologizing for his behavior, the beast man also asked for Assel's forgiveness, reassuring him he wasn't fond of eating people. Assel gave a nervous smile, relieved to hear it. After the rough start, the wolf introduced himself as Didikin, an apprentice blacksmith and occasional gatekeeper. He asked Rowan for his name and confirmed his purpose of seeking a new weapon. Didikin then invited the group to follow him inside, explaining that the real forge was beyond the door ahead. The group entered, and Didikin prepared them for what was coming. With a sly grin, he pressed a hidden button on the wall. Suddenly, gears began to turn, filling the room with the sound of heavy machinery. The ground trembled, and the room began to descend. Rowan and his companions gazed at the ceiling, realizing they were inside a magical elevator powered by enchanted stones and pulleys. Didikin explained it was the fastest way to the forge. As the elevator descended, the group was awestruck by the sight that unfolded. Emerging into a vast underground space, Didikin introduced the area as the Grand Karpadaki. Rowan marveled at the hidden forge, never expecting such an impressive place to exist beneath the surface. Didikin chuckled, pleased with their reactions, and promised there was more to see. As a reward for passing his test, Didikin revealed he'd take Rowan to meet the capital's greatest master craftsman, a dwarf renowned for his unparalleled skills. They witnessed an impressive sight. The blacksmiths were hard at work, their anvils ringing with the sound of hammer strikes. Ronan, in awe, never imagined such a vast forge existed beneath the capital. Daidakan explained that this forge supplied only to the royal family and nobles, with no discrimination, gathering the finest craftsmen in the empire. However, the true master among them was the elder dwarf, who had been smelting metal for an astounding 400 years. Though stubborn, Daidakan held great respect for him. With that, Daidakan kicked open a door, revealing weapons scattered across the floor. He asked what the elder was up to, then called out to announce his guests. The blacksmith, Elder Doran, was busy forging a blade and immediately recognized Daidakan's loud entrance. Despite the noise, Daidakan wasn't fazed and urged Elder Doran to clean up the mess. Elder Doran, ever the grumpy but skilled blacksmith, remarked that Daidakan nagged too much for his age. The conversation shifted to the guests, and Daidakan confidently pointed to Ronan, bragging about his sword skills. He was sure that Elder Doran would be shocked once he saw Ronan's abilities. Elder Doran was intrigued but skeptical, remarking that Ronan, with his youthful appearance, didn't seem to match the hype. He then asked Ronan to demonstrate his swordsmanship. Ronan, though flustered, complied and drew his sword. But Elder Doran immediately laughed, calling the blade rubbish, and effortlessly shattered it with a light tap of his hammer. Ronan, Assel, Maria, and Sita were left in shock as the sword crumbled before their eyes. Ronan, enraged, demanded an explanation, but Elder Doran merely pointed to the collection of swords behind him and calmly suggested, "Swing any of those." Elder Doran explained that with the trashy sword Ronan had earlier, it was impossible to truly gauge his skill. To make up for that, the Elder promised to give Ronan a sword of his choosing, one far superior to the piece of junk he had been using. This piqued Ronan's interest, and with a nod from Daidakan, he began to consider his options. Ronan approached the swords, still skeptical about the difference. He chose one, feeling its distinct energy, though unsure if it would truly be that much better. With a cautious tone, he warned Elder Doran that if anything broke, it wouldn't be his fault. The Elder didn't mind, assuring him that he just wanted Ronan to give it his all. Ronan stood in front of the sword, staring at his reflection in its polished surface. As he prepared to swing, memories of his encounter with Navarros flooded his mind. His stance was recognized by Elder Doran, who waited eagerly. With all his might, Ronan swung the sword, performing the same technique Navarros had shown him. The force of his strike unleashed a massive explosion, shaking the building and causing parts of the structure to shatter. Outside, people were startled by the explosion, wondering if a blast furnace had gone off. But there stood Elder Doran, Ronan, and a frozen Sita amidst the wreckage. The ground was deeply dented, and Ronan, looking confused, asked what had just happened. He tried to explain that it wasn't his intention to cause such destruction. Elder Doran, impressed, recognized the technique as Navarros. He asked Ronan if he was an apprentice. Ronan, surprised, asked if the Elder knew Instructor Navarros. The Elder, without hesitation, confirmed that he did and proudly stated that he had forged Navarros' sword. Ronan was shocked to hear this, then asked if the Elder was referring to the absurdly long sword. Elder Doran confirmed it was called the Secret Sword, Urusa, a masterpiece he had forged. Ronan, still trying to process, remarked that the sword was incredible. The Elder agreed, adding that the sword Ronan was holding didn't even come close to Urusa. He asked Ronan how it felt to use the sword. Ronan responded that it was amazing, admitting that at first he hadn't expected much. Elder Doran, pleased by Ronan's talent, revealed that he had suspected Ronan was still new to swordsmanship. He was thrilled to see such raw skill, and with a grin, he gave Ronan an enthusiastic pat on the back, so hard that it made Ronan groan. The Elder then cautioned him, though, being too talented could be a problem, as it would be difficult to forge a sword that would truly suit him. The sword Ronan had just used was clearly struggling to handle the power behind his swings. As he inspected it, he noticed a crack forming along the blade. He asked Elder Doran what he should do next. Elder Doran explained that normal materials couldn't withstand Ronan's strength, and that he would need the highest grade steel, melted with a special material. He suggested that at least a wyvern byproduct would work, but he was still considering what else could be suitable. At that moment, Ronan seemed to have an idea. He pulled something out and asked if it could be used. To Elder Doran's surprise, it was an eggshell. The blacksmith was skeptical, especially when he saw the massive hole in the wall caused by the earlier explosion, yet the front door remained intact. He began hammering the eggshell with his mithril hammer, but found it utterly useless, not even a dent. He couldn't believe such a material existed. With a mix of passion and disbelief, Elder Doran asked Ronan if it was truly acceptable to use something so valuable. Ronan replied that it was fine since the eggshell was useless to him, and asked if it would be enough to forge a sword. Elder Doran, now excited by the challenge, confirmed that it would be sufficient and promised that the Empire's best sword would be ready in 2 weeks. Ronan expressed his eagerness to see the finished product. Meanwhile, Assel and Maria were admiring other weapons in the room. Elder Doran, noticing their interest, suggested they meet with other masters while they were there. The two were thrilled by the idea. The blacksmith explained that he couldn't just send Ronan's friends away empty-handed, so they should tell the masters they visited at his referral, and they would be well taken care of. Though Elder Doran wished he could do more for them, he was currently focused on smelting the eggshell. With a hearty laugh, he continued his work, thoroughly enjoying the sound of his hammer striking the material. Ronan and his companions couldn't help but exchange amused glances, with Ronan privately thinking that the old man might be a little crazy. Meanwhile, deep underground, the atmosphere was tense. An angry figure cloaked in white muttered that the noise above was unbearable, and he was tempted to set everything on fire. Another figure, draped in white robes, advised patience, insisting that it wasn't yet the time to reveal themselves. The robed figure then ominously commented that the day would soon come when everything in the Empire, starting with the ignorant blacksmiths, would be buried in light and vanish forever. A few days later, Ronan found himself walking across the school grounds, recalling his encounter with Elder Doran, the Empire's most renowned blacksmith, who was going to forge him a sword. Isel and Maria, meanwhile, had commissioned other blacksmiths in the area. Although he knew it would be expensive, Ronan didn't mind. It wasn't his money. He'd pay for everything with the Grand Chia emblem. However, there was one issue. The sword would take up to half a month to complete. With time to kill, Ronan wondered what he should do. Isel and Maria were in class, so he wandered around and found himself in a familiar place, the training center for upperclassmen. He stood before the Galilean Hall, the place where Instructor Navarros held her classes. He had been putting off attending, knowing she'd told him to come only after acquiring a real weapon, but now that he had something, he figured he might as well go today. Before he could make up his mind, an ominous aura reached him. Turning to the side, he was horrified to see Instructor Navarros standing there. Without warning, she pinched his ears, greeting him with a long time no see and reminding him that he was supposed to come to class after getting a weapon. Ronan, still wincing from the painful pinch, tried to explain that he had his reasons for being late, but Navarros wasn't having it. She pulled him by his ears, telling him she'd listen to his excuses along the way. Ronan, in discomfort, pleaded for her to let go, shouting that it hurt. His loud voice caught the attention of a nearby student, who rushed to the window to investigate the noise. As she tried to look outside, she bumped into a male student named Cardan, who scolded her for blocking the way. She apologized, but Cardan continued to berate her, calling her a moron and telling her to hurry up and prepare for class instead of spacing out. She quietly agreed and hurried off. Meanwhile, at the sparring center, Instructor Navarros and Ronan faced the class. Navarros addressed the students, explaining that Ronan had been noisy during the entrance ceremony and that many of them had probably already heard of him. She formally introduced Ronan as a first-year martial arts department student, and he bowed politely, introducing himself. "I'll be in your care," he said, though he couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much more intense. The room buzzed with whispers as Ronan stood before the class. Isn't he the one who got second place among the first years? Yeah, but does he really look that impressive? Skipping a grade? Must be some kind of prodigy. Ronan, overhearing everything, thought bitterly. "I can hear you." However, amidst the sea of unfamiliar faces, he spotted a few he was glad to see, and one he wasn't. It seemed like things might get interesting, but his musings were interrupted by the arrival of someone new. A woman entered the room, slightly out of breath, apologizing for being late. She was the same person who had witnessed his earlier ear-pinching incident. As she walked to the front, she explained she'd been handling something urgent. Her voice struck a chord in Ronan's memory. Navarros, unbothered, waved it off. "No worries. Catch your breath. I was just introducing a new guy. There he is." The woman turned to Ronan and smiled warmly. "Oh, so this is the famous junior you've been talking about." Navarros nodded at Ronan. "Greet the teaching assistant properly." Ronan blinked in surprise. The woman extended her hand toward him with an easygoing smile. "Nice to meet you. I'm Adeshan, a second year in the martial arts department, and this class is teaching assistant. I hope we get along." Ronan froze. Adeshan Ecclesia? The figure before him was unrecognizable compared to the one etched in his memories. Adeshan Ecclesia, the Iron Lady, the first female general of the Empire. Known for her unyielding composure and strategic brilliance, she commanded entire battlefields with a steely resolve. Her subordinates often claimed that molten iron, not blood, ran through her veins. Yet here she was, smiling so freely, exuding warmth and relaxation. It was unimaginable. Ronan's mind reeled as he recalled the favor she had asked of him in his past life. Asterisk, tell me to focus on tailoring instead of wasting my time on nonsense. Asterisk, is this her true self? Ronan wondered. It was clear she had no memory of the past. He struggled to figure out what to do next. It was a massive dilemma. However, his thoughts shifted as he observed something peculiar. Adeshan was being ordered around by the students. Hey, Adeshan, fix my stance. Adeshan, I need another handkerchief. She patiently attended to every demand, no matter how trivial. Ronan frowned, his mind racing. Asterisk, why? Is she doing all this? Is this really what a teaching assistant is supposed to do? Asterisk. Before he could ask, a student approached him. He invited Ronan to spar with him. Ronan raised an eyebrow. A spar? Just like that? The guy apologized, admitting it was a bit sudden. He introduced himself as Cardin, a third-year student, and explained he'd heard impressive things about Ronan during the face-to-face ceremony. If the rumors were true, Cardin said he wanted to use the spar to learn something from him. Ronan replied that he was preoccupied at the moment. He was about to suggest sparring later, but Cardin cut him off, remarking that Ronan didn't even bring a weapon. Turning to Adeshan, Cardin called her a moron and ordered her to fetch his practice spear. Adeshan responded with a smile, assuring him she'd bring it immediately. Ronan's mood darkened. The word loser echoed in his head. His expression turned cold as he clenched his fists, furious that Cardin dared to treat her like that. When Adeshan handed over the spear, Cardin looked annoyed. He scolded her for bringing the long spear, reminding her that he'd switched to the short spear a while ago. Adeshan apologized, explaining that he'd used the long spear in their last class. Cardin's irritation grew. He struck her lightly on the head with the spear and berated her for talking back, accusing her of not knowing her responsibilities as a teaching assistant. "You're not even qualified to be here," Carden sneered, striking her head again. "If you begged your way into this class, the least you could do is handle your chores properly. Do you even have any shame?" Adeshan bowed her head, murmuring an apology. Ronan, who had been silently watching, suddenly stepped forward and grabbed the spear. Adeshan gasped, startled by his bold action. "Why are you butting in?" Carden snapped. Ronan's gaze was icy. "Let's spar like you wanted." Carden looked confused. "What are you even talking about? Don't you get it?" Ronan's voice was sharp as he stepped closer. "Let's spar, you idiot." Carden blinked, taken aback. "You're serious? Just because of her?" He glanced at Adeshan, smirking. "What? Are you two lowly commoners sticking up for each other? Are you twins or something?" Ronan's grip tightened on the spear before he let it go. His voice dropped dangerously low. "Shut up. You're about to regret this." Carden felt a chill as he saw the look in Ronan's eyes. "What are you?" "Get ready," Ronan interrupted, his tone deadly. "Because I'm about to teach you a lesson." Ronan swung his sword, and Carden struggled to block it with his spear. He was barely holding his ground when he noticed something alarming, cracks forming along his weapon. Carden couldn't understand how Ronan was wielding such overwhelming power without using any mana. With a powerful strike, Ronan sent Carden flying, shattering the spear in half. Ronan smirked. "Since you were complaining about using a spear, I went ahead and fixed it for you," he said mockingly. "What do you think?" Fuming with anger, Carden charged at Ronan, yelling, "You don't know your place." The broken spear thrust toward Ronan's face, but he remained calm. "Think you're getting out of this unscathed?" Carden taunted. The spear was mere inches from Ronan when, with a swift motion, it was sliced cleanly into several pieces. Carden froze in disbelief as Ronan replied coolly, "Yeah, I'll be just fine." Still stunned, Carden could only watch as Ronan spoke again. "You should worry more about yourself." Ronan's sword moved like a blur, striking Carden with a force that sent him flying once again. But he didn't stop there. His blade met Carden's face and torso in quick succession, leaving no room for retaliation. Gripping his sword with both hands, Ronan prepared a final blow. He swung it down, hitting Carden squarely in the body and jaw. Carden groaned in pain, his swollen face barely recognizable. His body slammed into the ground with a heavy thud. With a fierce expression, Ronan looked down at him and said coldly, "You're lucky this is inside the academy. Outside, you'd already be dead." The crowd of onlookers was stunned. One of the top-ranked third years had been defeated so decisively. Ronan turned his attention to the other students, scanning the group for his next opponent. His gaze landed on a guy holding a towel. "You," Ronan called out, stepping closer. "If it stinks, wash it yourself. Don't make others do it for you." The guy flinched, panic setting in. Ronan almost addressed Adeshan as Grand Commander, but quickly corrected himself. "Assistant Instructor," he said sharply, turning to the guy. "Is she your servant?" The guy stammered, too terrified to respond. Ronan gestured for him to step forward. "Come here. I'll fix that nose of yours." Before things escalated further, Adeshan stepped in. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said calmly, trying to de-escalate the situation. "But I'm fine. Please let it go." Ronan's expression hardened. "Move," he told her firmly. It was clear he was struggling to control his anger. "I can overlook a lot of things, but not this. Not when someone's looking down on you." His voice dropped as he added, "No one gets to treat you that way." He thought back to the Grand Commander and the respect she commanded across the Empire. Adeshan deserved no less. Brushing past her gently, he said, "Step aside. I'm not stopping until I put these guys in their place." The atmosphere shifted immediately when Navaraz commanded everyone to stop. Her terrifying aura engulfed Ronan, forcing him to halt. It snapped him back to his senses as she approached, her presence radiating a chilling power. "You won't be held responsible for the fight you just had," Navaraz declared, her tone icy. "In real battles, far worse accidents can happen." Her aura was like the piercing gaze of a ferocious serpent. The scaly, snake-like energy coiled around her as she locked eyes with him. Wearing a stern expression, she warned him, "If you escalate this further, I won't overlook it." She ordered Ronan to drop his sword and walk away. But Ronan couldn't move. A horrified expression took over his face as he turned to see a massive snake, its maw gaping as if ready to swallow him whole, its tongue almost brushing his face. Realization struck him. This was the unparalleled Sword Saint, Instructor Navaraz Aura. "What you were about to do wasn't a spar," Navaraz stated firmly. "And as the instructor, I won't let this lesson stray any further." Ronan tightened his grip on his sword, his defiance rising. "Then you should have known what your teaching assistant was going through," he snapped, his voice steady. He continued, "You stood by and watched, knowing full well what was happening." Navaraz's expression didn't waver. "That's between me and my assistant," she replied coldly. "It doesn't concern you." Her fierce gaze bore into him as she issued one final warning. This is your last chance. Stop. Ronan met her eyes with equal intensity. It doesn't matter to me if you're the unparalleled sword saint or not, he retorted, pointing his sword at her. My decision stays the same, he declared, his tone unyielding. Then, with a sharp glare, he added, now fuck off. Navarra sighed, her voice calm but laced with menace. It seems it can't be helped, the serpent-like aura surged, its massive jaws opened wide, as though preparing to devour Ronan entirely. Despite the overwhelming pressure, Ronan smirked. A green aura began to envelop him, its energy pulsing. He recalled a conversation from his past, a moment with the Grand Commander. Why did you take on the position of commander when everyone else refused? He had asked her. You'll understand one day, she'd replied with a somber expression. There are burdens that cannot be forced on others. Some are meant to be carried alone. That memory lingered in his mind, especially the scene of them standing before a mountain of corpses. He had often wondered about the weight she bore on her shoulders. Her voice echoed in his thoughts. I'm sorry for passing this burden on to you, she had said. Don't forgive me. Ronan's eyes snapped open. He was panting, his chest heaving. A voice pulled him back to the present. What's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? He turned toward the source of the voice, only to freeze in shock. It was her, the Grand Commander. She stood there, staring at him, and he couldn't help but lock eyes with her in disbelief.
Ronan woke up and instinctively addressed Ade-shan as Grand Commander, a title she had not yet attained in this timeline. Her surprise was evident and she questioned him about his words. Ronan quickly dismissed the remark, claiming it was a mistake and urging her not to dwell on it. Despite his nonchalant demeanor, Ade-shan remained puzzled by his behavior. Seeking clarity on his situation, Ronan asked if he was in the clinic. Ade-shan confirmed this, explaining that Navarros had instructed her to bring him there. She further revealed that Navarros intended to correct his behavior through supplementary classes. Realizing the gravity of his actions, Ronan immediately understood that he had provoked Navarros and feared the consequences. After delivering Navarros' message, Ade-shan hesitantly asked if Ronan's outburst during the confrontation had been driven by anger on her behalf. Ronan, startled by her question, avoided eye contact and offered a flimsy excuse. He claimed he had acted out of a sense of gentlemanly decorum, placing great importance on manners. Ade-shan, however, saw through his false bravado and called him out for his poor attempt at lying. She then gently advised him not to harbor resentment toward Cardan and the other students. Despite their mistreatment of her, she expressed her understanding of their behavior. Ronan was visibly shocked, his expression twisting in anger. He firmly declared that Ade-shan had done nothing wrong and questioned why she was subjected to such humiliation simply for performing her duties as a teaching assistant. Ade-shan was taken aback by his pointed question. In response, Ronan acknowledged that while Navarros might tolerate the students' misconduct due to their youth and impulsivity, he could not accept an instructor neglecting her responsibility to maintain discipline. He directly asked Ade-shan if she held no resentment toward Navarros for her inaction. Ade-shan, smiling softly, urged Ronan not to misinterpret the situation. She explained that she had personally requested Navarros to overlook the students' behavior. Ronan was stunned, struggling to believe her words. Ade-shan elaborated, confessing that she enjoyed privileges she felt undeserving of. While attendance in Navarros' class was reserved for sword experts, her abilities remained far below that level. Even after a year-long leave, she had yet to gain proper control over her aura. This revelation shocked Ronan. His memories of Ade-shan as a formidable warrior, wielding immense power on the battlefield, clashed with the image of her struggling with basic aura manipulation. Ade-shan's willingness to endure humiliation became clear as she further explained her reasoning. She didn't want to burden Navarros, who had granted her the opportunity to serve as a teaching assistant. Accepting the scorn of the students was, in her view, the price she had to pay for this position. She assured Ronan that she could handle the situation and urged him not to worry. Despite her composure, Ade-shan admitted that while she usually endured such treatment without issue, the events of that day had caused her genuine pain. Her words hung in the air, and an uneasy silence followed. Ronan then asked if her determination to endure these hardships stemmed from her ambition to become the Grand Commander. His question surprised Ade-shan, leaving her momentarily speechless. She marveled at how Ronan had deduced her goal, though she soon acknowledged it with a smile. With unwavering resolve, she declared her dream of one day leading the Empire's military. Though she lacked the prowess of a sword expert, her confidence in her knowledge of military science and tactics propelled her forward. Ade-shan vowed to continue working tirelessly to achieve her dream. Noticing the time, she realized her next class was about to begin. She encouraged Ronan to rest before returning to his own classes. Grateful for her support, Ronan thanked her, and she reassured him with a kind smile before leaving. As Ade-chan departed, Ronan's thoughts lingered on her parting words. Memories of her final moments from his previous timeline resurfaced. He recalled how she had asked him, with a bittersweet smile, to advise her against pursuing her dream of becoming Grand Commander if they ever met in the past. Instead, she had suggested he tell her to consider tailoring, a pursuit she had never tried. Ronan found himself in a difficult situation, unsure how to convince Ade-chan to abandon her dream and pursue tailoring instead. Days later, Ronan, Asil and Mary Alwyn arrived at the entrance of Grand Carpadakai's forge after receiving a summons from Doran. The old man had sent a carrier pigeon in the middle of the night, boasting about a newly crafted masterpiece. However, upon arrival they saw no sign of Doran or anyone else. Frustrated, Ronan kicked a discarded helmet, complaining about the poor condition of the forge and the lack of customer service. Mary was surprised by Ronan's unusually short temper and asked Asil if he knew the reason behind it, but Asil was equally clueless. Determined, Ronan decided they would head directly to the forge, ignoring Mary's concerns about the propriety of such an action. He justified his decision by reminding them that Doran had personally invited them. Without further debate, the trio stepped onto the elevator and Ronan pressed a hidden button. The mechanism responded, lowering them into the depths of Grand Carpadakai. Ronan continued his rant about Doran's neglectful behavior, promising to confront him. As they descended further, Ronan's complaints abruptly halted. Through the thick haze below, flames engulfed the forge. The once bustling Grand Carpadakai was now a scene of destruction, with unconscious blacksmiths scattered across the ground. The sudden chaos left Ronan confused, and before he could make sense of it, Asil's urgent call drew his attention. A massive rock giant was rampaging, chasing the remaining blacksmiths. Asil anxiously questioned Ronan's plan. In response, Ronan swiftly grabbed him by the waist, securing him firmly. Balancing himself on the elevator rails, Ronan prepared to leap into action. Before jumping, he ordered Mary to return to the surface and summon any soldiers or masters she could find. She immediately complied, leaving Ronan and Asil to face the threat. With decisive action, Ronan launched himself downward. Mid-air, he instructed Asil to use his telekinesis. Asil quickly invoked his skill, Invisible Hand, as they descended. On the ground below, the rock giant loomed, ready to crush the terrified blacksmiths. Just as the creature raised its massive hands, Ronan landed forcefully, shattering one of its arms upon impact. The giant, disoriented by the unexpected blow, paused in confusion. Ronan's intense glare reflected his simmering frustration. Declaring that he was already overwhelmed with thoughts and irritation, he warned the giant that it had picked the worst possible day to cause trouble. Unfazed, the creature retaliated, swinging its remaining fist toward Ronan. Despite the oncoming attack, Ronan stood his ground without flinching. At the last moment, he effortlessly evaded the strike, disappearing from the giant's line of sight. In a flash, Ronan reappeared atop the giant's arm. Using the momentum of his leap, he soared to its shoulder and delivered a devastating blow, instantly crushing its head. The force of the strike caused the headless giant to collapse, creating a massive explosion that echoed through the forge. The blacksmiths, still in shock, could hardly believe what they had witnessed. Recognizing Ronan as the young man who had previously visited Elder Doran, they were astonished that he had defeated a rock giant in a single blow. Ronan wasted no time in demanding answers. Climbing onto the giant's fallen body, he sternly questioned the blacksmiths about the situation. Before long, Asil rejoined them and the blacksmiths began to explain the dire circumstances. According to them, dozens of rock giants had inexplicably invaded the forge, leaving destruction in their wake. They admitted they had no understanding of why the giants had launched the sudden attack. Ronan, still seeking clarity, remained determined to uncover the truth behind the chaos. The blacksmiths described how the rock giants had emerged from underground, destroying everything in their path. They slaughtered and captured numerous blacksmiths, including Doran, before retreating back to their origin. They also revealed that Diddy Khan pursued the giants, but given the werewolf's lack of combat strength, they feared he might also be in grave danger. Ronan's expression hardened upon realizing the captured blacksmiths could soon become the giants' food. Determined to act, Ronan asked the blacksmiths whether the giant he had defeated was the last one. Receiving confirmation, he swiftly gave orders to Asil to check for any other injured survivors with Mary. He instructed them to heal the wounded and take cedar for assistance. Shocked by Ronan's resolve, Asil asked what he planned to do. Without hesitation, Ronan declared his intent to rescue the captured blacksmiths, especially Doran, from whom he needed something important. Meanwhile, Doran was trembling in fear, clutching a sword while urging Diddy Khan to flee. The elderly blacksmith was deeply grateful that Diddy Khan had tried to save him but insisted the werewolf should escape while he still could. Two rock giants were relentlessly breaking through the walls to reach them. Despite Doran's pleas, Diddy Khan refused to leave, visibly frustrated by the old man's insistence. He criticized Doran's lack of resolve, urging him to swing his sword instead of speaking nonsense. However, Doran adamantly refused, explaining that the weapon in his hands was his finest creation, a masterpiece too precious to be tainted by his mediocre swordsmanship. Diddy Khan dismissed Doran's words, calling him eccentric for fixating on the sword amidst the crisis. As the rock giants finally breached the wall, one of them raised its enormous hand to deliver a crushing blow. The massive hand slammed down with immense force, and Doran believed their deaths were imminent. Yet, to his astonishment, the impact was halted. Diddy Khan had blocked the giant's strike, though the effort left him heavily injured. His armor, previously a source of defense, was now shattered and rendered useless. As the giant withdrew its hand, Diddy Khan reflected on his regrets, lamenting how much he had left undone. Lost in thought, Diddy Khan failed to notice a swift presence moving behind the giants. In an instant, a series of red slashes cut through the air. The giants crumbled to the ground, defeated before they could react. A voice commended Diddy Khan's efforts, assuring him that the burden was no longer his to bear. Standing before them was Ronan, having single-handedly vanquished the monstrous foes. Both Doran and Diddy Khan were stunned, struggling to comprehend how Ronan had reached them despite the countless giants that had blocked the path. When asked how he managed it, Ronan casually revealed that he had slain all the giants along the way, saving the remaining blacksmiths in the process. The disbelief on Diddy Khan's face was evident as he questioned the plausibility of such a feat. Without dwelling on their shock, Ronan extended his hand to Doran, requesting the newly crafted sword. His own weapon had been destroyed in the battle, and he had overheard Doran's remark about the sword being his greatest masterpiece. The moment marked Ronan's unwavering determination, standing victorious in the face of overwhelming odds. Ronan received the confirmation that the sword in his hands was indeed his. Elder Doran, despite mentioning that the hilt was incomplete, assured Ronan that it was ready for use. Ronan expressed his gratitude and prepared to test the weapon. As he unsheathed the sword, a group of rock giants emerged, charging towards him. Instead of reacting immediately, Ronan decided to gauge the sword's capability with a simple, light swing. To his amazement, the movement unleashed a massive red slash that blasted the giants away, leaving the creatures stunned. Both Daidakin and Doran were equally shocked, though Doran's expression was filled with pride over his creation. Curious about the weapon's true nature, Ronan listened as Doran eagerly introduced it as La Mancha, a name inspired by his favorite daydreamer. Doran explained that the sword was remarkably light, almost imperceptible in weight, yet sturdier than mithril. Despite having no enchantments, the weapon already exhibited a formidable power. As the corpses of the rock giants lay scattered, La Mancha began absorbing their blood, restoring any damage it had endured. Doran revealed that this unique trait stemmed from the sword's composition, as it was crafted using Sita's eggshell. Ronan praised Doran's craftsmanship, acknowledging the blacksmith's unparalleled talent. While the two exchanged words of admiration, Daidakin grew increasingly frustrated by their nonchalant behavior in such a dangerous environment. He reminded them that they were the only blacksmiths left and insisted that they should leave the cave. Although Ronan was relieved to hear that there were no other captives, he refused to leave alongside them. Instead, he tasked Daidakin with escorting Elder Doran to safety, revealing that he needed to investigate something further. Daidakin, puzzled by Ronan's resolve, questioned his intentions. Ronan cryptically mentioned a rat lurking nearby, accompanied by two mysterious beings. Daidakin, unable to grasp the meaning of Ronan's words, pressed him for clarification. Ronan elaborated that the behavior of the rock giants was unnatural. Typically peaceful creatures, they were not known to engage in aggressive attacks. His suspicions grew stronger as he examined one of the defeated giants. As Ronan touched the giant's massive body, it began to vibrate. This unexpected reaction startled both Doran and Daidakin. Moments later, a magic circle appeared on the back of the giant's head. Recognizing the anomaly, Ronan asked Doran for his expertise. However, the blacksmith admitted his unfamiliarity with such magic, though he noted the sinister resonance of its mana. He speculated that this was the cause behind the giant's frenzied behavior. Despite the unsettling revelation, neither Ronan nor Doran had any idea who might be responsible. With a grim determination, Ronan turned his attention to the footprints scattered throughout the cave. As he studied them, he noticed a distinct pattern. Alongside the massive tracks of the giants were much smaller footprints. This discovery confirmed his suspicion. Humans had been present, moving in the same direction. Without hesitation, Ronan sprinted deeper into the cave, determined to uncover the truth behind the mysterious influence that had corrupted the giants. The chilling aura of the cave lingered as he ventured further, the unsettling mystery pulling him forward. Ronan moved cautiously through the underground passages, his senses on high alert. Along the way he encountered defense systems using monostones, indicating the presence of something valuable or dangerous. With each step, the clues confirmed his suspicion. The recent attack had been meticulously planned. Suddenly, faint voices echoed through the cave, prompting him to halt. He approached stealthily, concealing himself to observe the situation. Peering from his hiding spot, Ronan's expression darkened. A massive figure stood before him, a rock giant unlike any other, its body embedded with gleaming gemstones that emitted a golden glow. Towering in stature, it dwarfed the giants he had previously faced. In front of the dormant creature stood two individuals in white robes, their presence exuding authority and malice. Ronan quickly deduced that they were behind the chaos that had unfolded, though his primary concern was the sealed monster. If it were to awaken, the destruction it could unleash would be catastrophic. His concern intensified when one of the robed figures abruptly spoke about an intruder. The other, questioning the certainty of this claim, received confirmation. The brainwashing connection to the rock giants had been severed. The spellcaster, a blonde woman named Cyrilla, was responsible for the enchantment. Her companion, a man with ominous red eyes named Edwin, remarked on the Empire's unexpected swiftness in responding to the situation. Lacking the means to control the colossal giant and having exhausted their supply of rock giants, Edwin proposed dealing with the perceived threat himself. With an unsettling smile, Edwin's aura grew more menacing as he awaited approval. Cyrilla, recognizing the damage they had already inflicted on the Empire's weapon production facilities, consented. She cautioned that any exposure of their identities would provoke the ire of a particular figure they both seemed wary of. Their conversation revealed a calculated intent to escape, but before leaving, Edwin eagerly sought permission to eliminate Ronan. Though concealed, Ronan's presence had already been detected. Edwin explained that the distinct smell of sulfur from the blacksmith's forge had given him away. Without hesitation, he conjured a fireball and launched it at Ronan's location. The explosion engulfed the area, sending flames and debris in every direction. Edwin's laughter echoed as he relished the apparent victory, yet as the smoke cleared, his amusement faded. Ronan emerged unscathed, his eyes burning with defiance. The sight perplexed Edwin, who now faced the unsettling reality that the young man had evaded his initial attack. Flames still flickered around Ronan, illuminating the tension between them. Edwin's eyes narrowed as he acknowledged Ronan's agility. Without wasting time, he summoned another barrage of fireballs, this time taunting Ronan with the suggestion of binding his feet. Ronan's gaze remained unwavering. He quickly assessed his opponent's speed and magical prowess, realizing that Edwin was no ordinary mage. Despite Edwin's questioning, Ronan remained silent. The man demanded to know how Ronan had bypassed their intricate defenses. Instead of answering, Ronan retaliated with a question of his own, mocking the situation with a sarcastic remark about their eagerness to meet in such an extreme setting. Edwin, amused by the defiance, accepted the challenge. Cyrilla, however, expressed her frustration, urging Edwin not to waste time. Yet Edwin dismissed her concerns, eager to prolong the encounter for his own twisted enjoyment. With a malicious grin, he vowed to make the most of what little time remained. Edwin's expression twisted with a maniacal grin as he spoke of the Empire, declaring that soon the place would be buried in starlight. At that moment, something shifted within Ronan. The word struck a nerve, a memory rushing back to him, the exact same phrase spoken by a Hayut before his death. The echo of that moment ignited a surge of wrath within him. His usual playful demeanor vanished, replaced by an intense, unrelenting fury. With narrowed eyes and clenched fists, Ronan demanded Edwin to repeat those words. The tension in the air grew palpable, and even the veins on Ronan's face bulged with anger. Edwin's smug confidence faltered as he noticed the sudden shift in Ronan's aura. The light-hearted bravado was gone, replaced by an ominous resolve. Gripping his sword tightly, Ronan declared that both Edwin and Cyrilla would be coming with him. He had countless questions and he intended to extract the answers by force if necessary. Edwin's sneer returned as he scoffed at Ronan's demand, questioning whether Ronan even possessed the strength to subdue them. Conjuring another fireball into his palm, Edwin's gaze bore into Ronan with a twisted sense of amusement. But before he could finish his taunt, the air cracked with the sound of swift motion. In an instant, Ronan had closed the distance between them. The slash of his sword was so fast and precise that Edwin's reaction came too late. Pain erupted as his arm was severed, blood splattering across the ground. The shock paralyzed him for a moment as he stumbled backward, clutching the stump where his arm had been. Edwin's eyes widened in disbelief, barely comprehending the sudden turn of events. The ground beneath him stained red as he groaned in agony. With a cold glare, Ronan answered the unfinished question. Capturing them, as he had just proven, was more than possible. His demand grew sharper as he warned them to comply, his voice dripping with menace. The threat was clear: refusal would lead to further suffering. Edwin's cries of pain echoed through the cavern, and he desperately tried to reach for his severed arm, though the effort was futile. Cyrilla, still reeling from the sudden assault, stood frozen. Her composure shattered as disbelief overtook her. She couldn't fathom how even Edwin, with all his power, had been unable to react. While her mind raced, a dark shadow loomed over her. A powerful hand shot forward, gripping her neck with unrelenting force. The pressure against her throat stole her breath as Ronan held her firmly, his expression devoid of mercy. Despite her protests, he ignored her words, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. The silent threat in his eyes was unmistakable. He demanded her cooperation, making it clear that any resistance would lead to the same fate as Edwin. With unwavering authority, Ronan awaited her response, determined to get the answers he sought, no matter the cost. Despite the tight grip on her throat, Cyrilla gathered her strength and activated a bright yellow light that enveloped her body. It was a defensive spell called Mana Shield, which forcefully pushed Ronan back. However, the resistance didn't faze him. He took her reaction as a clear refusal to comply. Examining his trembling hand, Ronan acknowledged the sturdiness of the shield, but it was evidently insufficient to endure the force of his attack. Without wasting time, 2 red slashes of energy cut through the air toward Cyrilla. Her shocked expression revealed her disbelief. The shield, a spell she considered formidable, had been shattered by a mere student. The attack landed with devastating precision, causing her to cough blood as she screamed in pain. Ronan's stare remained cold and detached, yet his eyes narrowed as he made a curious observation. The pointed shape of Cyrilla's ears became evident. She was a half-elf. The revelation stirred a lingering question in his mind: how had she become associated with Edwin? While Ronan focused on Cyrilla, an ominous force gathered behind him. Flames swirled, forming a massive fireball. A voice suddenly rang out, declaring the spell's activation. Yet the sneak attack failed to catch Ronan off guard. Reacting swiftly, he turned to face the oncoming threat. With a single swing of his sword, a powerful slash cleaved the fireball in two. The divided flames hurtled past him, colliding with a colossal figure behind them, shrouding the area in a dense cloud of dust. Through the settling haze, Ronan's eyes fixed on something unsettling. Despite having severed Edwin's limbs earlier, the man was now standing tall. His body had regenerated, covered in a brown, earthen substance. The grotesque sight fueled Ronan's disdain. Edwin's expression twisted with frustration, clearly displeased with the turn of events. His voice broke the tense silence, demanding that Ronan step away from Cyrilla. The atmosphere thickened with hostility, every movement laden with the threat of escalation. But it was Ronan who acted first. Without hesitation, he stabbed Cyrilla in the leg. His expression remained cold as he reminded Edwin that the situation was far from under control. The pain Cyrilla endured forced Edwin to hesitate, knowing any reckless action would worsen her condition. Ronan made his intentions clear. Compliance was the only viable option. If Edwin refused to answer his questions, Cyrilla would endure further suffering. He even mockingly questioned if her limbs would regenerate like Edwin's. Faced with the grim ultimatum, Edwin's resolve wavered. The fireball he had been preparing dissipated, and his defensive stance relaxed. Reluctantly, he chose submission. Ronan's satisfaction was evident, as he remarked that unnecessary bloodshed was not his desire. His gaze shifted to Cyrilla, emphasizing the inconvenience their deaths would pose. Yet something was off. The timid expression Cirilla wore moments before was now twisted into a sinister smile. The sight unnerved Ronan. As his mind raced to decipher her motives, a massive hand adorned with glowing gemstones barreled toward him. The sudden assault caught him off guard. In the split second before impact, Ronan's instincts took over. He raised his sword in an attempt to block the strike, but the sheer force from the giant's attack was overwhelming. The impact sent him crashing to the ground, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. Dust blanketed the battlefield once more. From within the cloud, Edwin's fully regenerated legs emerged. He approached Cirilla, concern evident as he asked about her well-being. She affirmed her condition, expressing gratitude for his assistance. The earlier fireball, it seemed, had merely been a diversion. While Ronan's attention was diverted, Cirilla had silently completed a spell, a powerful incantation that obstructed his perception, ensuring the success of their carefully executed plan. Cirilla, though weakened and in pain, felt a sense of relief as she acknowledged the damage her surprise attack had inflicted on Ronan. Despite only having control over the giant's arm, she was satisfied with the results. Edwin, determined to ensure Ronan was defeated, declared his intent to finish him off. Cirilla, still wary, reminded Edwin to remain cautious, referring to Ronan as a monstrous being disguised in the form of a child. Edwin silently agreed, understanding the significant threat Ronan posed if left alive. As the dust settled, Ronan was revealed to be on his knees, visibly struggling from the immense force of the previous attack. However, his resolve remained unwavering. In an instant he disappeared from sight, dashing forward with terrifying speed. Edwin was caught off guard, and before he could react, his limbs were severed. Ronan, relentless, unleashed a flurry of slashes, rendering Edwin's regenerated body useless. Edwin collapsed to the ground, and Ronan, gripping his sword tightly, demanded answers. His desperate tone shook Cirilla, leaving her paralyzed with fear. Despite her terror, Cirilla instinctively tried to cast another mana shield, seeking any form of protection. Meanwhile, Ronan's body trembled from the toll of the battle. The previous assault had left him severely weakened, but his determination pushed him forward. He declared that he would not allow them to escape, though his words were cut short as his strength failed him. Collapsing to his knees once again, he realized his body could no longer respond to his will. Cirilla noticed Ronan's vulnerable state and, though tempted to strike him down, decided against it. The uncertainty of victory still loomed. She concluded that escaping and reporting the incident was the wisest course of action. Using her magic, she summoned a glowing portal. Before stepping through, she turned to Ronan and issued a chilling promise. She vowed to uncover everything about him, targeting his family, friends, and loved ones. Her words struck a nerve, igniting a deep rage within Ronan. Desperate, Ronan shouted for her to stay, unwilling to let her threats become reality. He was painfully aware of the stakes. The knowledge he had gained about the mysterious angels who destroyed the world was at risk of being lost. Allowing Cirilla to escape would mean repeating the same doomed fate. Despite his determination, his weakened body prevented him from taking action. However, just as Cirilla prepared to leave, a powerful presence intervened. A commanding voice echoed through the battlefield, uttering a single word, "Stop." Unlike Ronan's desperate pleas, this voice possessed undeniable authority. Cirilla's body froze as though compelled by an unseen force. Ronan, surprised, turned to see the source of the voice. A figure with a white-sheathed sword stood nearby, exuding a deadly green aura. The presence of the sword Saint Navrosi dominated the space. Navrosi's fierce gaze bore down on Cirilla. Without hesitation, she declared her intent to extract the answers she sought. Her arrival filled the air with a palpable intensity, signaling the end of Cirilla's escape. Overwhelmed, Cirilla was left motionless, fully aware of the predator that now loomed before her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Navrosi's fury was evident as she demanded to know why anyone dared to harm her disciple. Her unwavering authority left no room for defiance. Despite his battered state, Ronan couldn't suppress a smile, acknowledging the impeccable timing of his mentor. Navrosi arrived as the backup Miriam had secured, proving to be more than capable of handling the situation. Ronan expressed relief at her presence, but Navrosi, unimpressed, remarked on his ability to talk despite his injuries. Her demeanor shifted as she turned her attention to Cirilla, whose fear grew as Navrosi declared she would deal with her first. The blonde half-elf recalled Navrosi's fearsome abilities, including the power to paralyze opponents using her snake-like arc. Cirilla considered fleeing, but Navrosi's swift movements left her no chance. With a firm grasp on Cyrilla's cheek, Navrosi restrained her, preventing the use of magic. She admonished the half-elf for her transgressions, particularly for harming her apprentice. The sheer pressure of Navrosi's presence overwhelmed Cyrilla, showing her a terrifying vision of a massive serpent poised to devour her. Paralyzed and powerless, Cyrilla's consciousness began to fade. In her final moments, she mentally apologized to those she referred to as the stars. Her body collapsed as she succumbed to unconsciousness. Ronan watched in silence as Navrosi praised his resilience in holding off the adversaries until her arrival. However, further action was needed. Navrosi stated that Ronan would have to personally report the incident to the principal. Curious, Ronan questioned whether the future she had referenced earlier involved the Rodolan prison. Navrosi confirmed this, surprised by his knowledge. The prison, known as the Fortress of Screams, was infamous for its brutal interrogation methods, used to extract confessions from criminals who opposed the Empire. Seizing the opportunity, Ronan requested to witness the interrogation of the two captives. Although Navrosi initially dismissed the idea, calling it absurd, Ronan's determination became evident. He grasped her hand, insisting that this matter was of significant importance to him. His earnest plea caught Navrosi off guard, leaving her momentarily speechless. In the aftermath of the battle, healers and reinforcements from the Empire arrived at Grand Karpadaki. Though the area remained in ruins, the wounded were receiving care. Mara sighed in relief, observing the support being administered. Her condition was notably better than Asel's, who had overexerted himself using magic to heal and assist others. Even Sito appeared drained, but despite his exhaustion, Asel's primary concern was Ronan's well-being. At that moment, Ronan approached them, clad in Dirt Street student clothes. He greeted his friends, commending their efforts in aiding the blacksmiths. Mara had swiftly arranged the backup forces, while Asel and Sito had depleted most of their monagat to rescue over half of the craftsmen trapped in the wreckage. Ronan inquired about their condition, but his friends dismissed the question, noting his own dire state. Despite their insistence, when Asel and Sito attempted to cast healing spells on him, Ronan refused their aid. After receiving basic treatment, Ronan's attention shifted as Cyrilla and Edwin were transported away. Although both remained in critical condition, their lives were not in immediate danger. With a serious expression, Ronan informed Mara and Asel that he still had something important to attend to. A few hours later, Ronan and Navrosi arrived at the secret rendezvous for Rodolan's convoy, located at the Gringo Forest Cliff. A group had already gathered, with Navrosi and Ronan standing at the front. Navrosi indicated the approaching arrivals, and the sound of massive wings flapping echoed through the air. Riding enormous bird-like creatures, Rodolan's escorts descended, exuding a dark and ominous presence. As the creatures landed, the escorts immediately greeted and paid their respects to Navrosi. Cyrilla and Edwin, still bound and unconscious, lay before them. The leader of the group, displaying a commanding demeanor, announced that they had arrived to escort the criminals. Navrosi confirmed their identities, issuing a stern warning about Edwin's formidable regeneration ability. The leader, however, appeared pleased by the information, expressing how such a trait would make their tasks more engaging. His unsettling comments suggested the brutal nature of their interrogation methods. With Cyrilla and Edwin secured, the leader thanked Navrosi for her continued service to the Empire's peace, maintaining a cold, emotionless gaze. The escorts then departed for Rodolan, disappearing into the sky. Ronan and Navrosi observed in silence as the group faded from view. Breaking the stillness, Navrosi confidently remarked that 1 week would be more than sufficient to extract information from the captives. She promised to inform Ronan as soon as she received word from the prison and reminded him to remain prepared to act at a moment's notice. Understanding the significance of the opportunity, Ronan expressed his gratitude. He felt that he was now one step closer to uncovering the secrets of the giant beings that had once destroyed the world in his past life. With the convoy gone, time moved swiftly. Grand Karpadaki underwent restoration, expedited by the Empire's support. Ronan resumed his intense training under Navrosi's guidance. The supplementary classes primarily focused on sharpening his swordsmanship, preparing him further for the challenges ahead. Meanwhile, far away in Rodolan, the Fortress of Screams lived up to its name. Even from the hallways, the agonized cries of prisoners echoed ominously. Inside one of the dark, grim rooms, a table laden with torture instruments awaited its victims. An interrogator, fully engrossed in his task, was meticulously extracting the teeth of one of the criminals. As he worked, he muttered to himself, commenting on his own enthusiasm and the risk of losing track of time. Only then did he recall the imminent arrival of his expected guests. At the Fortress of Screams, the interrogator remembered his expected guests and promptly went outside to meet them. Ronan and Navrosi stood before him, and the old man politely introduced himself. He revealed that he was responsible for the new criminals recently brought to the prison and would serve as their guide for the day's visit. With a bright smile he stated his name, Karaka. Karaka inquired whether they wanted to see the criminals immediately, and Navrosi confirmed, preferring to gather further details along the way. Without hesitation, Karaka turned and led them forward. As they followed, Ronan kept his stern expression, scrutinizing the old man. He remarked that Karaka's overly kind appearance was unusual for someone in his position, noting how strange it seemed. Navrosi laughed in response, mentioning that many people had made the same observation upon meeting him. However, she cautioned Ronan not to judge based on appearances. As they passed through the heavy doors, Navrosi added that he would soon understand why Karaka was known as the worst nightmare of Rodolan prison. The dimly lit hallways, illuminated only by large torches, created a foreboding atmosphere. Karaka took this opportunity to begin his briefing. His previously cheerful demeanor shifted as he adopted a far more serious tone. He introduced Ronan and Navrosi to the criminal group to which Cirilla and Edwin belonged, Nebula Glacier. Navrosi, hearing the name for the first time, questioned whether the group was similar to Calaboro. Karaka admitted he couldn't confirm the comparison but was certain that Nebula Glacier posed a far greater threat. He detailed the group's involvement in numerous attacks across the Empire, including the destruction of Nalanda Granary and a devastating assault on the magic engineering research facility Edamin. The large-scale attacks committed by Nebula Glacier had made them highly wanted. Ronan processed the information carefully, attempting to recall any memory of the group from his previous life. However, nothing came to mind. As Karaka continued his explanation, Ronan interrupted to ask whether the criminals had ever used the words starlight or the star's advent. The question visibly unsettled the interrogator. Karaka, taken aback, confessed that he had never encountered those terms. Sensing the awkwardness of the moment, Ronan, desperate to cover his tracks, scratched his cheek nervously. He hastily explained that the criminals had muttered those words during his battle with them. Karaka stood motionless, seemingly lost in thought. Then, with a sudden shift in demeanor, he reached for his mask. The unsettling change in his aura was undeniable. The once kind and welcoming presence disappeared, replaced by a dark and oppressive atmosphere. Ronan remained silent, unnerved by the sudden transformation. Karaka's annoyance was evident, and the air grew heavier with tension. Despite his frustration, Karaka carefully readjusted his mask. He believed he had displayed a weakness during their first meeting and felt ashamed. It was the first time he had failed to extract crucial information from his prisoners, a fact that clearly weighed on him. Determined to correct his perceived shortcomings, Karaka approached the cell door and declared that he would now show his full sincerity. As the heavy door creaked open, Ronan's eyes widened in shock. The sight before him was far from what he had expected. The once smug and defiant expressions of Edwin and Cirilla were gone. Edwin's disheveled appearance and defeated state resembled that of a broken man. Cirilla, however, had endured even worse. Her body bore visible marks of severe mistreatment, and her vision had been robbed from her. The sight unsettled Ronan as the extent of their suffering became apparent. Karaka, still exuding an ominous presence, prepared to speak once more. Karaka praised Edwin's remarkable regenerative abilities, a result of his dark magic. Holding what seemed like a stick, the old man turned to Ronan, posing a rhetorical question about how one might deal with someone like Edwin. Without hesitation, Karaka demonstrated his approach. Using a heated piece of metal, he revealed that continuous application of heat would eventually prevent Edwin from regenerating. His tone shifted to excitement as he explained the grim reality of his methods, a clear reflection of why the place was called the Fortress of Screams. His unsettling enthusiasm made it evident that he considered this torture a way of bonding with criminals, even referring to them as his best friends over time. However, Karaka's satisfaction dimmed. The revelation from Ronan had complicated things. He expressed his disappointment, directing his frustration toward Edwin, accusing him of withholding information. Edwin, already visibly distressed, denied the accusations, insisting that he had told Karaka everything. But the interrogator wasn't convinced. The mention of the star's advent remained unexplained, and Karaka's fierce grip on Edwin's silver hair conveyed his growing anger. Karaka made it clear that if Edwin continued to withhold information, he could always shift his focus to Cirilla. Unlike Edwin, Cirilla lacked regenerative abilities, making the prospect of further torment unbearable. Her trembling form reflected her fear as she found the courage to speak, pleading for death over continued suffering. Her broken state, both physically and emotionally, was apparent. Roman observed the unfolding scene, finding it excessive even by the brutal standards he had witnessed as a member of the disciplinary squad. Despite the gruesome circumstances, he pondered a perplexing thought. If Edwin's identity was already exposed and there was nothing left to protect, why would he still refuse to speak? The more Roman considered it, the more he believed that Edwin might not be withholding information by choice. He raised the possibility that Edwin was bound by a forbidden cursed magic, a method often used to prevent the disclosure of sensitive information. Karaka froze at the suggestion, and Navarosi, intrigued by Roman's reasoning, listened closely. Roman explained that curses like these were designed as a form of insurance, ensuring that no information could be extracted even under extreme duress. Realizing the validity of this theory, Karaka loosened his grip on Edwin. The interrogator, visibly unsettled, admitted his oversight. First betrayed by his subjects and now having missed something so obvious, Karaka's frustration grew. Without further delay, he excused himself, instructing Roman and Navarosi to wait as he retrieved something that would address the problem. Minutes later, Karaka returned, clutching a peculiar creature known as the Cursed Eye. Described as a monster that devoured curses, it was a valuable companion in interrogations. Despite its grotesque appearance, Karaka held it with familiarity, expressing confidence in its effectiveness. His demeanor shifted once again, returning to his cold and determined persona as he approached Edwin. The cursed eye was placed on Edwin's forehead. Its small tentacles clung tightly to him, causing him visible discomfort. As it latched on, a glowing purple light illuminated the room. Edwin's agonized screams echoed through the space, while the creature's eye pulsed, eventually changing color. The transformation signaled the end of the process. Karaka's chilling presence lingered as he prepared to resume his interrogation, with the certainty that this time, Edwin would have no choice but to speak the truth. Karaka began the questioning by asking Edwin about the star's advent. Edwin hesitated at first, but eventually he started speaking. He described the star as an eternal entity, a divine grace meant to save the lowly beings of the earth, with small lights waiting beyond the stars. Cirilla, shocked by the revelations, reacted visibly as the criminal continued his confession. Edwin elaborated on the organization's purpose, which was to ensure that nothing obstructed their long-cherished goal. Cirilla's fear and desperation grew, and she shouted at Edwin, attempting to stop him from speaking further. Karaka, however, remained composed and requested a simpler explanation. He questioned whether something was about to descend from the sky. As the cursed eye devoured the magical restriction on Edwin, the criminal revealed the existence of entities called the Star's Children. Upon hearing this, an ominous atmosphere filled the room. Ronan froze, his suspicions confirmed. The first thought that consumed his mind was the name of the giant he had defeated in his past life, Ahayuti. Unable to restrain his fury, Ronan strode toward Edwin, ignoring Karaka's attempts to stop him. The intensity in Ronan's eyes reflected his barely contained rage. Without hesitation, he confronted Edwin directly, asking if the Star's Children he spoke of were connected to Ahayuti. Edwin was visibly shaken by Ronan's knowledge, his disbelief evident. Trembling, Edwin demanded to know how Ronan was aware of Ahayuti. But before the criminal could elaborate further, his face contorted in agony. Something unnatural was occurring. Recognizing the danger, Ronan hesitated, uncertain of how to proceed. Karaka swiftly intervened, placing a firm hand on Ronan's shoulder and instructing him to step back. The old man then summoned a red magic circle, its glowing energy encompassing Edwin. Despite the cursed eye devouring much of the initial curse, the remaining power surged uncontrollably. Bright light erupted from Edwin's body before it violently exploded into countless fragments. Karaka's protective spell shielded everyone from the force, though the walls were painted with blood. Surveying the gruesome aftermath, Karaka expressed his disappointment. The unexpected nature of the explosion concerned him. Armik, observing the scene, questioned whether such incidents were common. Karaka admitted that while rare, such results were possible. He explained that the curse on Edwin had been layered. The first part prohibited the criminal from revealing information about the star's advent to outsiders. The second layer prevented any mention of Ahayuti by members of the organization, resulting in a deadly explosion if breached. With the interrogation abruptly concluded, Karaka turned his attention to Ronan. The old man was now determined to find out how Ronan possessed knowledge of Ahayuti, suspecting it to be classified information linked to Nebula Clasier. Dark energy gathered in Karaka's hand, ready to react if necessary. His piercing gaze fixed on Ronan, he demanded the truth. The air grew heavy as the intense interrogation shifted focus. Remaining composed, Ronan met Karaka's intimidating glare. He calmly fabricated a plausible explanation. He claimed to have overheard Cyrilla and Edwin speaking during the chaos in Grand Cappadocia. Using this as his cover, Ronan maintained a stoic expression, emphasizing that he had initially disregarded the conversation. However, upon witnessing the interrogation, he reconsidered its significance. Attempting to ease the situation, Ronan apologized for his outburst and assured Karaka that his actions stemmed from misplaced excitement. Finally, Ronan questioned whether his account was convincing enough for Karaka, appealing to the old man's years of experience. The oppressive tension in the room lingered as Karaka contemplated the response, weighing Ronan's words carefully. Karaka understood that it was impossible for Ronan to have acquired such secret information by coincidence. He was convinced that Ronan was hiding something. However, when he looked into Ronan's eyes, he saw no danger to the Empire. The old man pondered whether the determination radiating from Ronan's gaze stemmed from a heavy responsibility or an unshakable conviction. Eventually, everything became clear to him. Ronan's eyes burned with anger toward the organization in question. As the tension grew, Navarro drew her sword and unleashed a green slash, her face reflecting frustration. She demanded that Karaka stop his questioning, clearly offended that her disciple was being treated like a suspect. Her protective instincts took over, unwilling to stand by while Ronan was interrogated unfairly, especially in her presence. Recognizing the intensity of her reaction, Karaka quickly backed down. He apologized, claiming he was merely being cautious. His tone shifted to a more light-hearted one as he tried to justify his actions, but the sincerity in his apology was evident. Ronan accepted it, expressing relief that the misunderstanding was resolved. Yet internally he remained wary. The risk of being detained for further questioning had been dangerously real. Changing the subject, Karaka admitted his disappointment over the loss of one of his precious cursed eyes. He explained how difficult they were to eliminate, far more resilient than other magical creatures. Ronan was surprised to learn of their formidable nature. Karaka even suggested that if Ronan took a closer look, he might find the creature's appearance somewhat endearing. Just as the old man was about to encourage him to touch it, the cursed eye began to behave strangely. The creature's eyes shifted color, indicating it had absorbed a curse. Karaka found this odd since the eye had not been near Cyrilla, making it unlikely the curse came from her. He deduced that the curse had come from Ronan instead. Recalling how the eye had approached Ronan when Karaka cast the protective spell, the old man's suspicions deepened. Without warning, he handed the cursed eye to Ronan. The moment the eye touched Ronan's hands, it latched onto him, absorbing a significant amount of curses. Its small body twisted and distorted as it neared its limit. Ronan watched in shock as the creature's form destabilized. Moments later, it burst, splattering blood everywhere. Disgusted, Ronan recoiled, questioning why it had exploded. Karaka, though slightly amused, noted that it was unprecedented for a cursed eye to fail in containing a curse. Growing serious, Karaka calmly addressed Ronan. He revealed his belief that Ronan was cursed, catching him completely off guard. Panic crept into Ronan's voice as he demanded an explanation. Karaka proceeded with a series of questions, asking if Ronan had ever felt limitations in his day-to-day life. Things like an inability to run freely or difficulty holding objects of steel. He further inquired if Ronan had ever experienced a disconnect from his own mana. Ronan's mind flashed to his struggles in sensing mana, but he tried to hide his reaction. His silence was telling, and both Karaka and Navarro noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor. The old man reassured Ronan that if he preferred not to discuss it, he would not press further. Regardless, Karaka admitted he would be unable to break the curse himself. However, he left Ronan with a grave warning. The curse's strength and malicious intent suggested it had been placed by someone powerful and with ill will. As the hours passed, the darkened night deepened. The interrogation had concluded, and Karaka, Navarro and Ronan emerged from the imposing walls of Rodolan prison. The old man expressed his gratitude for their visit, mentioning that he would reach out again once he discovered a way to lift the curse on Cyrilla. He acknowledged that the process might take some time. Navarros accepted this and reminded him to report any findings promptly. Karaka then shifted his attention to Ronan, observing that the young man seemed troubled. His comment startled Ronan, who did not deny the observation. Thoughts of the curse still weighed heavily on his mind. Karaka, however, encouraged him not to dwell on it. He reminded Ronan of his status as a student at Philion Academy, though Ronan was visibly puzzled by what he meant. Without hesitation, Karaka elaborated. He brought up the existence of someone who had been attending the academy for a considerable time. According to him, this individual was the most knowledgeable about curses. In fact, Karaka believed this person was the only one capable of helping Ronan. The one he referred to was none other than Professor Maya's secret.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, it really helps. And for more content like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see another part. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you next time. Bye-bye.